Oh, I'm on. All right. I'm going to call to order the City of San Carlos City Council successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency Housing Authority regular meeting for November 13th, 2023. If you will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Are there any, before we do, normally we have council communications. I just wanted, we had Veterans Day over the weekend, so I just want to extend on behalf of the council a thank you to all our veterans, especially our Vice Mayor, John Dugan, for his service, and for all who have served our country. With that, I'll see, are there any changes to the order of the agenda?
Nothing from staff this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Anything from council? All right. Now we'll move on to presentations. This is 5A, presenting certificates recognizing our 2023 Civics Academy graduates. I'm not going to read them all now because I'm going to read them again, and I'm going to have a glass of water before we start. Okay. Yeah. Somewhere I've got some. Hold on, I've got notes somewhere that I was supposed to say. Which I hopefully didn't lose. No. All right. All right. So tonight we are first starting to recognize all our Civics Academy graduates. This is the first time I think we've done this in a couple. Is this on too? Oh, I can do that. Look at that. So first I want to thank Quinn for putting this all together and doing all the work on that. So. And then I know Niall, is she still here? She's hiding in the back. Thank you, Niall. And to all our department heads and staff that came to help participate in making this a really wonderful program. We had a chance to mingle beforehand with some of the graduates and really heard some really great response and how good it was. So I know we're going to have some good word of mouth for next year. So be prepared for the next group. So. So obviously we want to celebrate the dedication and commitment of our San Carlos Civics Academy graduates. So congratulations to each of you for all the hard work and for joining the program. It's been 4 years since we last hosted one, so it's been quite a while. So you are almost like the first class, essentially, of it. So, so these 24 participants have dedicated 6 weeks of their time to attend a comprehensive program designed by city staff that covered vital topics including governance, emergency services, budgeting, traffic management, city planning, and parks and event planning. Through this process, they've demonstrated an unwavering commitment to understanding the intricacies of our city's operation. This year also marked a historic moment as we had high school age students this time. Were permitted to participate for the first time. So we had a pretty diverse group of individuals who represent different ages, backgrounds, and perspectives. Now, I talked to one of those students and I asked her if she would join the Youth Advisory Council. She said, I'm going to think about it. So that's good. It's good to learn to say no early. So, but not for too long. We'll get you at one point. Civic education provides the knowledge and tools necessary for active citizenship in a functioning democracy. Our democracy, while valuable, depends on the collective responsibility of all of its citizens to uphold its principles and ensure its progress. So as you move forward, consider the influence and potential impact you hold in shaping our own future and the future of the San Carlos community, rooted in the education you've gained. So thank you, graduates, for your commitment to civic education. I have every confidence that you will use your knowledge and skills to create a better future for San Carlos. Thanks once again and congratulations. And I'll look forward for your applications for various commissions and more participation. So, and we like to hear from all of you on the things we're doing right and the things we're doing wrong. So now that you're all educated on it, you can help us a lot. So congratulations. I want to just mention there's a few people who couldn't attend, so I just want to recognize them. And we're not here tonight. Linda Bao, Eduardo Flores, Karen Latino, Robert Martinengo, and Marcus Sitzman. So with that, let's turn over, and we're going to have everyone kind of come up. I'll present you with your certificate. We'll take a photo, and I think we're going to have everyone stand over there so we can take one big group photo at the end. So first up is William Cheney. All right. You get your pin. And your certificate.
Thank you.
You get Quinn over here. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. And now we have Suzanne Daly. All right, here is your pin, Suzanne, and your certificate. All right, next is James Esquita. All right, here's your pen and your certificate. Do you mind? No, go for it. And next you have Lynn Esquita.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
Thank
There
you.
you go.
Thank you. I won't make you touch
You're
me.
fine. I think that's a new thing. We have Civics Academy date night, apparently. So, all right, Susan Ferris. All right, Joe Fimiani. All right, Chris Frangos. All right, Ariana Gianola. All right. All right. You wanna hold that? So much for that pin. You got a picture? Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. Congratulations. Heather Liu. Here is your pen, and I'll give you that. Congratulations. Thank you. Come on, you got more space on this side. All right, Michael Lohr. All right, here you go. All right, Michael, congratulations. Karen Molinari. Congratulations. Thank you. All right. Swathi Nalapa. Congratulations. Who's that?
Sorry, there we go.
All right. Kevin O'Connor. All right. Michelle Pang. All right. Stephanie Roberts. We'll try to get, is it Shabai? Shaibi. All right. Lena, is it go by Lena? Lena Shaibi. All right. There you go. Congratulations. Thank you. There's that. And
Our little photo op.
Yeah, I want to touch the mayor.
all right. Catherine Sherman.
Thank you.
All right. There you go. Oh, congratulations. Get the handshake first. All right. Almost done here. Nellie Stein. Congratulations. Thank you. Oh, here's that. And there you go. All right. And Robert Stein. Congratulations, Robert. There's that. And this. All right, here you go. All right, so apparently we had multiple date nights, and Robert and Nellie told me they've been telling everybody already about the Citizens Academy. And I went to the first meeting. Now, I think Robert might be the person who's lived in San Carlos the longest. How many years have you lived in San Carlos? 58. All right, I think that was the winner for this year. So, all right. So can we have the whole, we'll come down and take a photo with the whole council? All right. We can slide down, yeah, we can slide down this way now.
You want us?
We'll see where.
Yeah, where would you
Where would you like to slide?
Maybe you slide everyone this
Can we
way.
slide down this way a little bit so you have more space?
Yeah.
Get Ron in.
Is that on wheels? No. I don't know where we should be, but I'll head over here.
You're good.
I want to touch the mayor.
We're famous now. Congratulations. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Before we take comment, I just want to see if there's any comments from my colleagues. Okay, Vice Mayor Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and congratulations, graduates. Proud of each and every one of you. It's a big commitment to show up each night and eat all that good food and get to know your fellow citizens a little bit. But seriously, it's a good program, and I hope the planning game was fun for everyone. It's not that different than what we do here. I know I went through the Citizens Academy in 2018. Joined the Planning Commission, and now I'm up here. So appreciate that you guys went through it, but also just your commitment to our community, and hope you guys stay involved and take some of those learnings, and you can get involved formally or, just when you're talking to neighbors. Hopefully you guys have a better sense of what we do here. It's not as straightforward as you might always think, and we appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. I don't see any other hands. Before we take public comment, I just want to remind members of the public that this meeting is a limited public forum. For public comment, speakers must stay on topic if speaking to a particular agenda item, and if speaking during the general public comment, they must address matters within the single subject matter jurisdiction of the city. If speakers fail to follow these rules or the city's rules on decorum and civility, they will be warned, and if they continue to disregard our rules, their opportunity to speak will be ended for the evening. So, Crystal, do we have any public comment on this item?
Yes, we do have one hand up.
Okay.
I'm going to take that from last name Hess, first name Rudy.
Okay.
Good evening. Am I coming through all right? My mic sometimes messes up. I'm going to assume so, yes. My name is Rudy Hess. I'm a resident of San Carlos, and I am ably disabled. I ride in a wheelchair, electric scooter when I can, and I just want to thank the city very much for all the landscaping that they're doing along public routes outside of, Main Street and things like that. But I don't travel on Main Street. There's too much traffic. I tend to take all the side roads, and I really, really appreciate all the tree planting that's been going on and the improvements that have been being made in sidewalk cracks and, levels so I can get up in my chair. But again, the best thing is all the trees that are being planted. So we're going to have all these trees available in the future to go and hang up all these fucking niggers.
This is off topic, so we're going to end this
Gas
item.
all
We've
Jews.
been warned that this is off
Hail
topic.
Hitler. You're a nigger.
Okay, it's time to end that. Apologize for that. We've been dealing with some of that. Let's move on
Mr. Mayor, we do have two more hands
I
up.
thought we already closed it already, Crystal.
Okay.
Yep, so we're going to move on. Okay, so now we'll move on to council communications and announcements. Actually, and if people want to head out, they can. This would be a good time for folks to leave if they'd like to.
But you're more than welcome to stay.
All right, I think we've got a couple. First, Councilmember Venkatesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to wish Happy Diwali to everyone who celebrates.
Thank you. Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to report on one of the committees I sit on. This is a local policymakers group. It's the Electrification Task Force for Caltrain that's been going on for about 10 years now. And during that time, it was a long struggle to get the funding to electrify the Caltrain line from San Francisco to San Jose. I'm happy to report that all the poles have now been installed. I forget how many hundreds of them there were, but they're now all installed. They are testing new train sets, and look for September 1st of next year for the first day of passenger service. Also, we get a report on high-speed rail. I know there's varied opinions about high-speed rail, but they are actually buying train sets now, and they have environmentally cleared 422 of 500 miles. So both of these projects are proceeding. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Collins. I don't see any other hands raised. Okay, let's go to the consent calendar. Does anyone want to pull any item from the consent calendar? And if not, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve City Council consent calendar items A through J and Didn't realize I had to read all this when I spoke up. Now I see why John hesitated. And item K, adopting ordinance number 1603, an ordinance of the City of San Carlos to create objective design standards for single-family development by amending San Carlos Municipal Code Title 18 Zoning, Chapter 1803, Rules of Measurement, 1804, Residential Districts, 18.12, Hillside Overlay District, 18.15, General Site Regulations, 18.20, Parking and Loading, 18.26, Planning Authorities, 18.27, Common Procedures, 18.29, Design Review, 18.40, Use Classification, and 18.41, Terms and Definitions, and adding a new subsection, 18.23.310, Urban Infill Units under 18.23 standards for specifics, uses, and activities. And item L, adopting ordinance number 1604, an ordinance of the City of San Carlos amending the San Carlos Municipal Code section 18.23.210, accessory dwelling units, junior accessory dwelling units, and sections 18.03, Rules of Measurement, 18.12, Hillside Overlay District, 18.29, Design Review, and 18.40, Use Classifications.
I'll second that.
Mr. Mayor, just before the vote, I did confirm that there were no hands raised in Zoom for this item, just before you proceed.
Thank you, Greg. Okay. I have a motion and a second. Crystal, can you call the roll?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember Michelle?
Yes.
Councilmember Venkatesh?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dugan?
Yes.
And Mayor Rec.
Yes. Okay, the motion passes 5-0. We will now move on to item 8, which is a report to council. Is 8A, receive a report on the Summerhill Housing Project at 11 El Camino, a 242-unit residential development in the MUNB 120 district.
Good evening, council members. I'm Rucha Dandi, Senior Planner. This evening, I will be presenting the 11 El Camino Real project, a 242-unit residential development project. This is an informational item only, so no action is required for this item tonight. The project applicant is Summerhill Apartment Communities, and tonight we are joined with Elaine Breeze, a Senior Vice President of Development representing the applicant. The project was designed by KTGY Architects and Jet Landscape Architects. As an overview, this project was approved by the Planning Commission in their September 18, 2023 meeting, and the entitlements approved by the Planning Commission were design review, a transportation demand management plan, a below market rate housing plan, a protected tree removal permit, grading and dirt haul certificate, and vesting tentative map. As this project is consistent with the underlying zoning district and with the waivers and concessions that were granted to this project, the Planning Commission was the final approving body for this project unless it was appealed within 10 days of approval. Staff has not received any appeals for this project, and therefore the Planning Commission determination is final. The 11 El Camino Real project site is located along the northern San Carlos city border, which is the existing CVS pharmacy store along El Camino Real. Along the southern side of the project site is the San Carlos Plaza and Caltrain track running along the rear side of the property. The project vicinity consists of a mix of commercial uses such as hotels across from El Camino Real, that is the Holiday Inn and the Hyatt Place, and some residential condominiums across from El Camino Real. The proposed project is the first project processed under the city's new zoning ordinance, effective early this year in March 2023. The proposed project will greatly help contribute towards the state allocated RENA numbers since it proposes 242 residential units. The underlying zoning district, as I mentioned, is MUNB 120. The site is 2.2 acres in size. The proposed FAR is 3.27, which exceeds the standards. However, a waiver is granted pursuant to the state law. There are 297 parking spaces proposed, and 10% of the site will be landscaped. The overall height will be 8 feet 7 inches, which again exceeds the standards. However, a waiver is requested for this. The project also proposes 36 below market rate housing units in varying unit sizes and bedroom numbers. Before you is the proposed site plan that incorporates uses such as entrance foyer, gym, fitness center, 8 residential units on the first floor, work from home spaces, loading, bicycle parking, landscaping, and surface parking lot, which is tucked behind these active uses. Here, the light orange color represents all the residential uses, while the light pink color represents the non-residential or amenities on the site plan. On the second floor, there is a club room facing El Camino Real, residential units, and 2 courtyards featuring pool, outdoor seating, and landscaping. The elevation along El Camino Real, the building is stepped back to move the building mass away as seen from El Camino Real. All active uses are dispersed along the corners to help activate the street frontage, as highlighted on the slide before you. The uses such as work from home spaces, leasing office, clubhouse, all face El Camino Real. This elevation is along the F Street or along the Belmont City border. The exterior finishes, building material, and landscaping wraps around the building on all sides to help integrate the building design and articulation on all 4 sides. This is the side elevation viewed from San Carlos side. Here, as you can see, the exterior finishes wrap around to create a cohesive design that is well balanced. On the rear elevation, mainly as seen from the Caltrain track, the surface parking lots are screened utilizing metal screening and landscaping features. The rest of the building utilizes materials and finishes similar to the rest of the building. For the landscaping, the features that are proposed are 12 street trees, fenced dog park that is along the southern border, raised planters, decorative planters along the perimeter of the site, and bicycle racks along El Camino Real. On level 2, there are 2 courtyards proposed. They call it North Courtyard and South Courtyard with similar amenities. The materials proposed and the colors here will be primarily, the exterior finishes are in 3 finishes: stucco, horizontal lap siding, as you see the brown color there, and brick veneers. There is glazing for the non-residential uses facing El Camino Real, metal panels for balconies, and metal screening for garage. Here is a view as seen from El Camino Real from San Carlos. You can see the active frontages along the corners and residential units on level 2 onwards. This is a view showing details of the street improvements proposed by the project, including the landscaping, the ground landscaping, raised planters, and trees in pots, as you can see on the right side of this image. Along with other entitlements, as I had previously mentioned, the project requires a TDM plan as well. That's the Transportation Demand Management Plan, which requires the project to reduce 20% trips by utilizing various trip reduction measures. The applicant is proposing the following measures, as you can see on the slide. This is few of them as secure bicycle storage, online transportation kiosk, and on-site e-scooters. In addition to this, the city's trip reduction requirement, the applicant is also required to meet the CCAG's 25% trip reduction requirement, which the applicant does meet and has submitted all the required measures to the city. As a next step, the applicant will be submitting a building permit application estimated in 2024, and the construction is estimated to begin in 2025. With that, that concludes my staff presentation. If someone wants to learn more about this project, we have a web page dedicated for further details and attachments for this project. And I'm here to answer any questions, and as well as Elaine will be here to answer any questions from the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Rucha. This is an informational item, I think, just because the council wasn't going to see this normally, and it's obviously a major housing project in our community, so we wanted to be able to share it at a council meeting. Did any of my colleagues have any questions on this? I don't see any. All right. Thank you for that. Elaine, did you want to say anything, or you're, as a developer on this, I'm happy to, you don't have to, no pressure to do that, but just want to offer that opportunity.
But my name's Elaine Breeze. I'm Senior Vice President of Development for Summerhill Apartment Communities, and I just wanted to say thank you. On behalf of our team, one, thanks staff. We were the first project under the new housing element, new zoning, a lot of things, and they were tremendous bringing it through. Thank the Planning Commission who supported the project's approval, and thank the council's leadership in approving all of those documents at the beginning of 2023 that actually facilitated and made this project feasible. So we just want to say thanks.
Thank you, Elaine. I see Councilmember Collins and Vice Mayor Dugan have their hands up. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also want to thank staff for their work on this, and Elaine and Summerhill Apartments. When I first saw this project, it's very much like it looks now. It doesn't look like it changed that much, at least in appearance. But it was a great process, and it's very much needed housing for our town. So thank you for working with us.
Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, no, I'm supportive of this project. Housing's been a top goal of our city ever since I've been involved. We went through a, to some extent, state-mandated upzoning process, but we do need the housing, and this is exactly the kind of project we were hoping for, and we appreciate Summerhill for being tuned into our process and being able to drop these plans right after we approved that zoning. So that was an accomplishment for everyone, staff as well. And I just want to pause. This is the single largest housing project in the history of San Carlos. That's an important milestone we should all recognize, and that has also created the single largest batch of affordable housing, the 36 BMR units. So both milestones and both solid accomplishments towards our housing goal as a city. So I did want to pause with that. I do have a couple questions. Not for the applicant necessarily, not really for this project, but just what I saw in the packet specifically, and I do not have an expert understanding of this SB 330, but what I saw was an unlimited number of waivers being allowed, and I just wanted to understand that a little bit better. I appreciate Summerhill. I think they asked for some reasonable accommodations that, and we were able to get to a good project here. But what does that mean? Unlimited waivers? Like, what can a waiver be? What can it be? How do, as a city, does this, what does this mean to us? That's kind of a startling thing to see in a planning process.
Sure, thank you for that question. So the state law allows waivers and concessions, where waivers mean a waiver from a development regulation that the city has, and that is to accommodate the housing that a developer is proposing, especially the one that has below market rate housing units. So for example, a waiver could be from development regulations such as setbacks. For example, the city usually has a minimum setback requirement of 5 feet. But let's say a developer cannot meet that requirement to accommodate more housing units, they may request a waiver for that. And the state law allows to request for unlimited waivers from the development regulations that the city may have. So that is not limited to just setbacks, but it could be floor area ratio, it could be the height limit, setbacks, or anything else that is within the code.
Thank you, but I mean, surely that doesn't mean they can do anything. So, Greg, is there a legal standard at foot here, or like, what is a city, what does this mean? Are we, we don't have local regulations on these projects anymore? I mean, what is the implication here?
Yeah, it's a developing standards in housing law, and why we went through the whole housing element and the ordinances you just adopted is we can apply objective design standards to projects now. But there's no, and it's a ministerial approval, there is no more discretionary approval. There are some limited exceptions for historic resources, for direct health and safety effects on the public. And direct is specifically out of the statute. It has to be a direct impact. It can't be an indirect impact. But if the waivers have an effect on the building of the project, I'm paraphrasing the law here, but creating the affordable housing in the project, then they're entitled to the waiver. It's like an entitlement under the law. So very limited. This is the state's effort to streamline housing. And in this project, we went through a lot of those issues to try and review the issue. For example, as you saw in the staff report, the sound impacts and the construction times. That was a waiver that was requested. And we were, for an example, we were pointing to a health and safety impact, and it resulted in a compromise language that you see in the development to address early morning sounds that we felt was a health and safety impact. But we worked with the developer and worked through that pretty in a reasonable manner, and didn't affect the timeline of the project. But hey, we are very constrained, and when you first read that, I agree. Unlimited number of waivers sounds like a lot.
Just to play it out. So I want to build 24 stories, so I'm going to request a waiver from the height restrictions. Do we have, what is our degree of freedom as a city to push back on that?
Yeah, I mean, there may be some ability to push back on something like that, but the law, as I understand it, it's not written to deal with those types of things. But we can, on the general plan does have some relevance to it, and I can get back to you on some detailed analysis of it. But it's just unlimited waivers is the way the statute's worded.
We had a responsible applicant here, but you could see an a aggressive applicant, really pushing on this.
Some projects like that probably don't pencil out, but someday we might see projects that are pushing the envelope.
Yeah, interesting. And then my second question is, so we did just go through this exercise. We did just rezone El Camino and other aspects of our city. We have traditionally, we have existing uses on El Camino. Those are important commercial businesses that we all patronize. And they're, important to our economy, important to our city. And they also bring a vibrancy, a life, and, so it's no secret to my colleagues, I'm a proponent of mixed use and activated areas. And here we have a big mono use, housing. We need housing. I'm not opposed to this project. But I guess I didn't really consider in this zoning process we went through that, have we eliminated our requirements of first floor activated uses like we did at Trestle and elsewhere in town?
No, for the mixed use, we haven't eliminated the utilization of commercial spaces on the first floor. They're still allowed.
They're allowed, but can we require them? I don't think Trestle wanted that, but we required that to have activated use by our train station.
Yeah, we don't require that, but there is a separate process to allow first floor residential uses, and that's a conditional use permit.
Okay. What do we expect to see I think left to their own devices, developers would rather do 100% residents, but that leaves us in a car all the residents will have to get in their car to do everything throughout the day, which I think weighs on several of our goals as a city. And so I'm not sure we really fully considered the implication of getting rid of first floor activated uses.
Well, to go full circle, I think that might be something that would be subject to a waiver request.
Yeah.
If we tried to require it. So I think we have a preference for that in our code, if I'm not mistaken, but it's not required. I mean, it's required in certain circumstances, but it's subject to a waiver if it's a housing project, and it's not something that we can absolutely prohibit because of the state law.
Well, when is it required? I mean, apparently it wasn't required here, because
I think Al's got wanted to speak.
Okay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. So the difference between the Trestle project and this project is the Trestle project went through a planned development process, very much like you're seeing on some of the larger buildings in the east side. And that's because they wanted special zoning at different heights and things than our zoning would allow at that time. So the city had more discretion when you have those kinds of processes, and we could ask for more things. And we didn't have many of these assembly bills and other state legislation that limited our ability to ask for those things. So that's why we could do it in that case. In some cases, there are better locations than others for these small retail uses. And we're kind of taking a look at that with our downtown plan. So you'll see some analysis of that. So that's it. And residential developers, especially if you're not super close to, let's say, the train station like Trestle was and downtown, there's a synergy there. So this is kind of a little farther down the road, and that's perhaps why they didn't look at it as part of this project.
Yeah, understood. But, as our community economic development director, I mean, should we be concerned about the displacement of all the businesses on El Camino?
Sure, absolutely. And businesses, as we all know, they come and go, and when new development comes in, there's only so much authority that the city has to say, for instance, if an existing business is there, that the developer must have that same business or give them the option to come back into that very location. Unless, again, you have like a PD or some other discretionary approval. So if it's like this project, we have, it did go to our planning commission, but we had limited discretion and sort of authority to require a property owner, for instance, to make room for that existing business to go away and then come back. So it'd be a new business at maybe a higher lease rate.
And I'm not necessarily saying a developer would have to keep the same tenants. It's more just the displacement of, many different uses onto just one use that then puts all those new residents in their car basically to, do most things throughout the day, which I believe weighs on several of our goals, climate, transportation, et cetera. So, I mean, has this ship sailed, or is there a way we can help usher in real mixed use and some balance of uses on our 2 miles of El Camino and elsewhere?
Yes, I think there's a number of things that we could do, particularly with our downtown plan, and you can incentivize ground floor uses. We've done it in other places. For instance, reducing parking is an idea, right? So we used to require a lot of parking for ground floor uses, and they couldn't afford to put that parking in, or it was infeasible. So there are incentives that can be put in the zoning or the downtown specific plan to encourage activation of the ground floor of some of these mixed use projects. The other thing to consider, as I mentioned, I kind of say location, 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 like a realtor would. And what I mean by that is when we see areas of El Camino that are closer to Laurel Street, that are closer to the Caltrain station, and and San Carlos Avenue, or even on the other side of Old County, as you see around the train station. There are certain areas that are more feasible or more likely for retail and service uses that serve our community. So you're going to see people that want to go there, and that the lease rate would make sense for them and for the property owners or developer. So I think that we have to take a really fine-grained approach to it and look at it block by block and see what's around it, so that there's a context to our retail.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I'm not saying every project needs to have activated first floor, but I think what we have set up right now, we're going to get no activated first floor for most of this new increase in residential zoning, which is basically throughout our commercial district, except for downtown. So I just would ask my colleagues to think through the implications of that, and I probably will bring forward an agenda item at some point that I think we should study mixed use, or where we should think about more activation than just our downtown. And again, I do think pockets of activated retail and services are what allow people to walk and have a sense of community and get them out of their cars, and saves on our traffic, saves on our parking, saves on our climate. So anyway, thank you all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. And I think we discussed this when we talked about the housing element as well. This topic came up, so I'd be interested to just kind of understand kind of what we ended up including in the housing element, because that was separate from this SB 330. There was discussion on that as well. So perhaps if we talk about it further, I think that's something to look at. Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just if I could offer some recollections of the Trestle Apartments project. That was a discussion that we didn't have about mixed use, because there were 8 buildings, and all along it was intended that the 2 southern buildings would be all commercial. The other thing is that we wanted as much housing as we could get, and so that was a big deal. And then we ended up lopping off a story off of 2 or 3 of the buildings, which sort of further impacted the residential. But it was a different time. And I also would point out that I don't know how many years it was after the project was completed that those 2 southernmost buildings were almost empty. There were no commercial clients for, 5 years, Al? It was quite a while. I think they're full now, and that's great, but it took a while for those spaces to get occupied.
Thank you, Councilmember Collins. Did you? Go ahead, Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I hear you on that. I've always thought that those did remain vacant. I believe mostly because we were requiring it to be retail or restaurant. And I'm of the mind that there's a lot of services out there that would like space on El Camino. Just look on what's on El Camino now. And if the zoning had been relaxed to allow dental offices or even a tech company to go in, Redwood City allows that, then you'd preserve that first floor for activated uses. And I doubt it would not have taken 5 years to lease up if we weren't as strict as we were on what could go in there.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. I did have one question regarding the transportation demand management program. So it talks about e-scooters in there. So we currently don't have a process. Is this sort of intended to be with a company like Lime or something? Are these going to be, how do we manage those scooters being left all over, like in downtown and stuff like that, if they're not, we don't sort of have a process or a program in place now for that? Either Elaine or Rucha is fine.
I'll defer to Elaine to answer to that question. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is actually a private scooter organization that we would contract with, and the scooters are located in the building, and they get returned to the building. So it's not like a Lime program.
A private contractor would be responsible for managing that, making sure things weren't left
That's correct.
downtown for 3 days or something
Exactly.
because someone didn't say.
And they're only for the residents.
Got it.
And they're, Righty is the company that we currently have in multiple buildings.
Great. No, I'm glad that we're utilizing that. I just wanted to understand the process. Thank you. Okay, I don't see any other hands at this point. All right, so Chris, I think we're ready to see if there's public comment on this item. Do you have any hands?
There are no hands for this item.
Okay, so I'll move on to the next item, which is a public hearing on consideration of adopting a resolution approving the 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027 residential and commercial solid waste collective service rates, including unscheduled services pursuant to Proposition 218. Stephen Machida.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council member, Stephen Machida, Public Works Director. So as stated, we're requesting that the City Council hold a public hearing to adopt the resolution to adopt the solid waste rates. So with me tonight, I also have Alex Handlers, who will be able, from Bartle & Wells, who will be able to answer questions that the council may have. So just a real quick overview. So the solid waste utility is a self-supporting enterprise that is entirely funded by rates. The number of factors that are impacting the cost, and we kind of went over the last time, cost of service, which requires a rate increase. The city's practice of implementing the gradual increases really has served the city well because it always has met our funding needs. San Carlos rates are really are in the middle range when compared to other South Bay waste management agencies, and this is a result of always doing some moderate rate increases yearly. So the last time the City Council actually had increased the solid waste rates were in mid-2021. The rates were set at 6%, and it went from mid-2021 to 2023. So as I mentioned earlier, the City Council historically has always adopted an annual increase, really a smaller annual increase, to kind of keep the rates aligned with the cost of providing the services while minimizing some of the impacts, the larger impacts to our ratepayers. So the reason why we're really talking about looking at another rate increase is because we're seeing some larger costs coming up starting in 24. And these are the 6 items that are kind of described in your staff report. However, in 2024, the contractual costs will go into effect, which will affect the solid waste. So these are the 6 items. Increasing the solid waste disposal at Elks Mountain. The new Shoreway Environmental Center operations, actually, that contract is going to be going up, as well as the contractual costs for Recology. The air quality, or Bay Area Air Quality Management District, always has new regulations as it relates to the air. And then the green waste disposal costs has been going up, as well as any contractual cost escalation and future cost for regulatory compliance. So as a result, Bartle & Wells actually trying to create a race rate model for the upcoming year, and that was the 4.5% that council directed staff to put in our Proposition 218 notice and really set the public hearing for tonight's meeting, November 13th, 2023. So this is just kind of the table that you saw last time, and this really kind of depicts the 4.5% rate increase. It's a constant 4.5% rate increase over the 4 years. And basically it really is intended to kind of fund our costs as well as kind of maintain our reserve balance. And as you can see on the third row, it kind of gives you the average charge for a 32-gallon cart over the next 4 years, and this is the monthly charges. So let's just go back on what is the 218 process. So as I mentioned, it's a 218 process, it's a state mandate, where we are required to notify all the customers of the potential rate increases. So in this case, in September 25th meeting, council directed staff to actually set the public hearing for tonight, as well as set the 4.5 rate increase for the utility. So these notices were actually mailed out at a minimum of 45 days prior to today's public hearing, and actually for us, it was 49 days. The rate increases are subject to majority protest rules, which means, we have approximately 11,000 accounts. So essentially, we would need 5,500 plus one vote in protest, for us. So if there is no majority protest, council may adopt the rates up to the proposed level in the 218 notice. So here's some new information since the last we had the meeting. So approximately 3 days after council actually directed staff to set the public hearing date, the South Bay Waste Management Authority at its September 28th meeting actually voted to use about $2.43 million available in the stabilization reserves to lessen the impact of some of their member agencies. It's my understanding that the use of these funds really apply to all the member agencies, so individual agencies could not opt out. Basically, it's all or nothing. So the cost share for San Carlos of this rate reserve is about $180,603. And this is a one-time decrease in only in 2024. So we actually had Bartles and Wells actually prepare a new model based on if we wanted to use the rate stabilization fund. So if you look at the solid waste rates, and this is the table that you saw earlier, except for rate scenario B, which is actually, it's a little bit different than what we had saw before, but it's for 2024, it's 3%, and then for 2025 through 2027, it ramps up to 5% each year. And if you look at kind of the general the monthly charge for the two rate scenarios, they pretty much match pretty closely. By the end of 2027, we're approximately about the same position that we would normally be if we were in a straight 4.5% rate increase. So just real quickly, state law allows the city council to set a lower rate from the 218 published notice, basically. So if the council wishes to go 3% lower rate, you certainly do that without doing any additional public noticing or holding another public hearing. However, if you wish to extend it into 2025 through 2027, we would be required to do another Proposition 218 notice to the community as well as hold another public hearing. The one thing of note is the rate scenario B, or the rate stabilization fund, or if we use the rate stabilization fund, it really doesn't include a component to restore those funds that we would probably need to pay back. So basically, those rates that are identified in 2025 through 2027, the increases will most likely be higher than what's listed in the 5%. So again, the model that we ran did not include a component to kind of pay back the rate stabilization fund, if in fact we decided to use that. So the analysis is staff still recommends adopting the 4.5% rate increase, for all rate classes over the next 4 years. We believe that this rate ensures that the city will meet our solid waste funding needs, maintains the solid waste reserves, and accounts for the city's portion to restore the rate stabilization funds, going forward. And then actually a little bit on that third bullet is a change. As of today, I checked with the city clerk, and I believe there's still only 3 protests increasing of the solid waste rates. And I don't believe anything has come in since we spoke. So it's 3. As I mentioned, there are approximately 11,000 accounts, and we would need 5,500 plus 1 for the majority protest to take effect.
We should probably recount that then.
Okay. So our recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027 residential and commercial solid waste rate collection service rates, including the unscheduled service pursuant to the Proposition 218. And with that, that concludes my presentation, and certainly I'm available, as well as Alex Handler is available to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you, Stephen and Alice. Are there any questions
for Stephen or Alice on this. I don't seem to have one question. Obviously, rates are going up given some of the additional costs that you talked about. And I don't know, Stephen, if you know this, or I mean, or Alice or Joe or Mariana is here as well. You know, how are we comparing with sort of this, having done this sort of gradual increase in this 4.5% versus some of the other members of the JPA? I know you said we're in the middle. Do you expect sort of, you know, in 2-3 years we'll stay in that middle? How is that moving potentially with those increased costs?
Well, I think in general, as I mentioned, I think council has really done a very excellent job as trying to keep us kind of make sure that we pay our funds or pay our costs. And by doing the small incremental increase each year, we're able to kind of sustain that, that level. Unfortunately, there are some of the other member agencies that perhaps haven't been as diligent as doing that. So, they have actually seen kind of these spikes where, and it's just unfortunate in 2024, we're going to see a lot of kind of unanticipated costs that just went up as a result of some of the new contracts going into effect. And so that's one of the reasons why we really felt that, because of the reserves that we actually had built up over time, we were still able to kind of sustain our reserves or apply those reserves and still not having to actually increase our rates significantly, whereas perhaps some of the other member agencies may have to actually dip deeper into their reserve funds if they even have those funds themselves. So that was one of the reasons why the SBWA board actually had voted to actually use a rate stabilization fund to kind of help other agencies kind of with their funding.
Okay, thank you. And then just as a follow-up on that, just so I understand from the presentation, if, our share of sort of the SBWMA reserve that was released is about $188,000. So are you, and the recommendation is just to continue on that 4.5, not to necessarily use that $188,000 for this coming year, because we would have to pay it back at some point. So by holding it, we can then just replenish when sort of that need happens without having to dip into our reserves to do that. Is that sort of the best way to describe it, or is there a different way to sort of?
That's exactly the way to describe it, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, I mean, and I do respect the folks we've heard from who, are concerned about the increase. No one appreciates an increase of, something they can't avoid. But I do observe, I think we've been in a high inflationary environment as an economy. We've seen, I think, 9% a couple of years ago. I think this year will be 5 or 6%. So I guess I'll just ask, so in that perspective, 4.5% actually seems like a modest increase. I mean, it's in fact a decrease in real terms, I guess you could say. So like, how did we do that? I mean, that's good. And, we should, I believe, I hope people understand we've done a good job here with a 4.5% increase as opposed to something more in line with inflation. And I'm just like, what do we attribute that to? Just we've managed this well over the years?
And thank you for the question, Councilmember Dugan. I think you answered the question. And basically, I think it was, this council as well as prior councils actually had done a really good job as far as kind of positioning ourselves to actually kind of continue to contribute to the reserve, such that, essentially the rainy day fund, basically they kind of set aside monies such that when you do encounter kind of unexpected costs or unexpected expenses going forward, you have the money in the bank, if you will, ready to kind of match and fund your costs. So by having these kind of small incremental increases over time, you really kind of build up your fund reserve so that you can prepare for these, if you will, the rainy day funds.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Stephen, for the presentation. My question is about the stabilization reserves. I guess I'm just a little confused about why we have to pay it back. This seems more like a loan program to me, not really a granting of reserves. Is that something that was mandated under the JPA, that any reserves given out is really a loan and cities have to pay it back? And I'm just wondering, for the public, I think that's a little confusing too. So thank you.
So I'm really not that familiar, so I may ask Joe. Joe, can you kind of help me explain this?
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, fellow council people. Thank you, Councilmember McDowell. My understanding of the one-time action of our board several weeks ago on the September board meeting was it's a one-time reimbursement out to the member agencies on a proportional basis. So your percentage to the total, you would get it, and there is no payback to it. What I think they were referring to was rebuilding your own internal reserve. So that's my understanding of that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Mayor, did you want to chime in since you're part of that board, or I don't know if you want to.
Or Vice Chair?
Agree with Joe on this. So I think it is more a matter of sort of that reserve fund, right, to be able to replenish it or to be able to build on it for what we have. And then I think the board, I think, took some due diligence in trying to look at that from the SBWMA reserve fund for this, because we limited resources on that, and so trying to I think there's an intention to rebuild that over time from the SBWMA funds that come in, so not necessarily from the San Carlos funds, but we would be able to have that for our reserve to be able to manage our own balances.
If I might just add to that, thank you. Yeah, just to get some clarity, there's two different sets of reserves. At the agency level, we have multiple reserves funds for capital, equipment replacement, rate stabilization, et cetera. And then you all have a reserve where you use that as a tool to help manage, which you have done incredibly responsibly. That's why you're in this position. I've been at the podium at other agencies, and there's a little different story being told there. So I commend you guys for always taking that prudent approach. And I think that goes right back to the city leadership, Mr. Malpe as well. So we just want to be clear on this. The board took action because we recognized that this was a year that had some unusual step-ups with some of these major contracts transitioning. And this is a one-time measure to help soften the blow on that. So we had the reserves there, but it's the first time that's been enacted, I might add.
Thank you. And I'm a big proponent of using reserves when needed. So
when needed
thank
is
you.
The key. Yes.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council McDowell, for that question. Okay, I don't see any other questions right now from the council. This is a public hearing. Crystal, are there any public comments on this item?
There are no hands for this item.
Okay. All right. Well, then I move.
So under our new protocol, we give people a minute or two to raise their hand, and then we close the list of people at that point.
Like we have no hands. Okay.
There
All
are
right.
no hands.
Okay. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Crystal, can you call the roll, please?
Vice Mayor Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Venkatesh?
Yes.
Mayor Rack?
Yes. Okay. So this is an action item. Do any of my colleagues have any further or final comments? If not, I'm happy to call for a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move to adopt Resolution 2023-134,
134.
a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving the 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027 residential and commercial solid waste collection services rates, including unscheduled services pursuant to Proposition 218.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Crystal, can you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Venkatesh? Yes. Vice Mayor Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
And Mayor Rack?
Yes. Okay, motion passes 5-0. We're now moving on to item 10A, which is a study session. to discuss and provide direction on the preparation of a historical resource inventory for the city. All right, I think we have Megan and Andrea.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Megan Woolley Osdahl, and I'm a principal planner in the Community Development Department. So for my presentation this evening, I will share how the city addresses changes to historic structures today and possible options for the future. The City of San Carlos has a number of structures with historical significance, both residential and commercial. Today, the city uses a variety of resources and mechanisms when reviewing applications for changes to historic structures. These mechanisms are listed here, and I will also share more about each. In 1991, a historical resource inventory report was created. This effort was funded by the City of San Carlos and was led by the San Mateo County Historical Association and the San Mateo County Historical Resource Advisory Board with support from community volunteers. The report includes a history of the City of San Carlos, eligibility requirements for National Register listing, and a list of San Carlos properties and areas that are eligible for the National Register listing. In conducting research into past City Council minutes, staff did not find evidence in the minutes that the report was adopted or received by the City Council. Since 1991, some structures have been removed from the report at the request of property owners. And upon further research and confirmation by a historic preservation consultant, it was determined that the structures did not have historical significance, and therefore they were removed from the report. The report includes a primary list of 53 properties that are designated as landmarks or resources with historical significance. 2 neighborhoods are identified as having historical significance: the Hacienda Garden Apartments and the 1000 block of Elm Street. 19 properties are listed in the primary list, which contribute to the Elm Street neighborhood's historical significance. All of these properties and areas are potentially eligible for the state and national register, but are not currently listed on the register. The report also includes a secondary list of 38 properties which may be of historical significance and need further study to determine whether or not they are significant. City staff's understanding is that this secondary list was not reviewed or evaluated by a historic preservation consultant. Currently, if a property owner proposes a change to the exterior of a structure that is listed on the primary or secondary list, the burden is on the property owner to pay for the historic evaluation. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, historic resources such as buildings, structure, or archaeological resources are considered part of the environment and are subject to review. Any exterior change to a structure on the primary or secondary list requires CEQA analysis. CEQA applies to projects with discretionary review. Therefore, CEQA does not apply to building permits since these are considered non-discretionary or ministerial. Another tool that we have is the California Historical Building Code, which provides an alternative building code, alternative building regulations for the preservation and rehabilitation of historic structures. This code provides more flexibility than our San Carlos Building Code that's in effect now. And then lastly, we have the Mills Act program, which allows local governments to grant tax relief for the restoration and preservation of historic structures. And the City Council approves these contracts. As a part of this effort, staff proposes conducting additional outreach, community outreach on this program. So now we'll move into the possible options that staff has prepared for council's consideration. The options include option 1, to update the 1991 Historical Resource Inventory Report. Option 2, prepare an ordinance to further protect historic structures. And option 3, no change or continue using the process we have today. Option 1 would direct staff to refresh the 1991 report. This would include both reevaluating the structures listed in the primary and secondary lists and identifying any new structures that are now considered historic. We also recognize that some properties may be removed, especially from the secondary list. Within option 1, the council could consider sub-options or a combination of these sub-options. Option 1A, to update the 1991 report for all residential and commercial properties and historic resources. And this could also include parks. So Burton Park is included in the 1991 report, but this list could be expanded to other parks. Option 1B, to update the 1991 report only regarding commercial properties. And then option C, to update the 1991 report only regarding residential and commercial properties that may be eligible for the state register. This option would require hiring a consulting firm specializing in historical and architectural preservation. Staff estimates that the cost would be around $230,000 to $250,000, and this process would likely take 2 years to complete and would require considerable staff time. If this option is selected, staff's next step would be to issue a request for proposals and to return to council with a budget request. Option 2 would direct staff to prepare an ordinance. This option would require either adoption of the 1991 report or an updated report. If adopted, the ordinance would provide the most protections, and it could also allow the city to deny certain projects under state law. This option is also the most restrictive for property owners in that the ordinance could restrict future demolitions, additions, and uses of historic structures. Similar to option 1, this would require hiring a consulting firm. Staff estimates the cost may be around $25,000 and would take about 1 year to complete from beginning drafting to council's consideration. Option 3 is our no change option. This would direct staff to maintain the current process of using the 91 report and CEQA when reviewing applications. So this chart is also in your staff report, but it provides a comparison between the 3 options. And staff's recommendation tonight is that the council consider the options presented in our presentation and in the staff report and direct staff on next steps as appropriate. This concludes our staff presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Megan. All right, are there any questions on this? I see Vice Mayor Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report, good overview, and I don't know if anyone hasn't read it yet, this, at least the history pages of our 1991 Historical Resource Inventory is pretty fascinating. I was surprised how much I learned. I've spent a couple Saturdays in our history museum, and this was even deeper. I just want to make sure I understand what we do today. So today we don't have a ordinance to protect historic structures. Is that correct?
That's correct. So today we do not have an ordinance on the books. The process that we use is that we use the primary and secondary lists in the 1991 report. And if a property owner comes to us with an application for a change to the exterior, we look to see if they're on the list. If they are, then we are then kicked into CEQA analysis, and we use the CEQA process to review the application.
Okay, and what gives us the authority to do that?
I would say state law, as I look to our city attorney.
The impact on historic resources is a potential environmental impact that needs to go through CEQA, but it could be a different level. I mean, the levels of CEQA depend on what's being proposed.
I see. And then our objective standards that we just adopted, what does that mean with this? I mean, all of this would be subjective in nature, but is the state law and historical preservation supersede or somehow interact with the new objective design standard requirements?
Generally, the new state law, the Housing Accountability Act, and the Density Bonus Law allow cities to put some restrictions on historic resources and the development of those historic resources. It doesn't override completely the objective standards, but it is one of the grounds that you're allowed to deny a project on if you can make the findings. But the burden is, as I understand it, is on the city to show that it is a significant impact on the historic resource.
I see, but we still have the authority to require the owner to pay for the historical evaluation? Oh.
And through the chair, I just wanted to clarify, in order, and Greg, please correct me if I'm wrong, in order to use one of those historic findings to deny a project, there has to be an ordinance adopted, a historic ordinance specifically.
Okay, yeah. So to date, we haven't really done anything in this regard. Like, we've had historic projects come through, and it sounds like we've never requested CEQA analysis of
So
that?
it's more of a process of elimination in a sense. So in order to say, for example, your addition is exempt from CEQA, we do the historic analysis. In order to be exempt from CEQA, the applicant needs to demonstrate that their project complies with these standards that are put out by the Department of the Interior. And so the analysis is looking at their proposal saying, yes, it meets these standards and therefore is exempt from CEQA, and we can move forward. And so it's more of just, that's how we exempt it under CEQA, is through that historic analysis.
I see, but but without an ordinance, we can't say no. But then what do we say? We put them through that analysis, and then now we understand it better, and then they go do what they want to do anyways?
So we have not had an application come forward, obviously, since the odds have been adopted in this ministerial review. What we found, for example, with building permits that come through, is we have in our system all the projects that are listed on these two lists are flagged in our systems. And so we're able to meet with people early on to discuss, their project and what implications there might be. We haven't had any, I would say, any complaints, so to speak, about how we've done it or had people do it. I will say, a complaint, if you will, are people who are on the secondary list and have to, pay the fees and have analysis to prove that they're not historic per the state and federal standards.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, but we've really never had an example where we said, no, you can't do that. It's always been kind of a consulting. They've taken our suggestions, et cetera.
Right, and so we've had ones where, for example, the project might not meet the standards, and so their architect worked with their historic consultant and ours to create a project that would meet the standards. And it was usually minor modifications.
But it sounds like if an owner just said, no, I want to do it anyways, we really couldn't say no.
I would defer to our city attorney.
It's sort of a hypothetical, but I think a certain set of facts might enable us to say no, but we'd have to work through the particulars of that project. Like an example, if it was one of the structures on the list, the Housing Accountability Act and everything doesn't apply to a single-family home, so we still have some ability to apply our objective standards that you just adopted to try to make that work. And then also CEQA is not overridden by any of these laws, so CEQA still applies.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I guess I still don't understand if we need a historical ordinance or not.
The other aspect, we've had a few that was mentioned by Megan, was the Mills Act. So we've had a few people request property tax relief because their house qualifies as a historic structure. So I mean that's kind of the carrot side of it, that people can avail themselves of some property tax relief by declaring their home historic and complying with all the standards that would apply to their home. But yeah, if somebody came in, we'd have to evaluate that and determine whether or not the property was significant. We do have some that are nationally registered, and that would be, under CEQA, that would be those would be really hard to modify from their historic nature, and the standards allow some flexibility for somebody like that who can. I mean, the inside of the house is not as important typically in the National Register. as the exterior look to the general public.
Okay, but it's fair to say adopting a historical ordinance would be viewed as a major new restriction on the houses, at least on this list. Is that our understanding? Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, I think I had Councilmember Collins next, then Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Greg, I guess I can't declare myself historic and get tax relief. Well, based on what you told us, Megan, it sounds like you couldn't find any record of a council adopting it. Did they go through this same process? I mean, do you have any?
Well, I consulted the person who I thought would know best, which is our city clerk here. And she helped me, Crystal helped me look in the records, and which thank you very much, Crystal. She looked back through city council and planning commission records and from the minutes from a span of years in the 90s. And we can't see that it was presented to the council. It was not adopted by the council. There is some reference to it, some sort of adjacency around it, but the report was not formally adopted by the Planning Commission or the City Council.
Yeah, I was on the Planning Commission in 1991. I have no recollection of this coming through, so that now it makes sense why we never saw it.
There used to be a Historic Resources Commission, and that may have been where it was discussed.
Yeah, it never came through us. Okay, so I think one of the other questions I had was answered, and that is that but you said that no property owners have been coming forward and asking for any of these historical projection or protections. Is that correct?
Actively asking for historic protections.
Did I mishear that?
I don't believe them.
It's only through the Mills Act.
Okay, yeah. The sort of request that we receive is through the Mills Act, so to have tax relief via the Mills Act. Well, I think the flip side, rather than asking for protections, what we hear, and it's not that common actually, but that when property owners are asked to hire their own consultant, that it really delays the project and has an extra cost. So that's sort of more what we hear. But again, that's also not incredibly common.
Right. This also helps me understand the Garden Hacienda Apartments issue, which is actually mentioned in that historical report. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In the late 90s, that there was a proposal to build what is there now. And those apartments were literally falling apart. I mean, you had stairways collapsing and that sort of thing. And I do remember that there were members of the public who wanted Virginia Classen, the daughter of the original builder, to register or ask for historical status. And I think if she had, what got built there might not have been, but there was a compromise in the end so that the buildings along San Carlos Avenue were preserved. But now that I'm getting a fuller picture of it, I think I understand why that didn't happen on that project. Mm-hmm. So, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Councilmember McDowell, and then Councilmember Venkatesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the great presentation. I guess I'm kind of struggling with the same questions that John had, but I'm going to ask it in a different way. So the inventory is not an official city document because it was never formally adopted, and yet we're treating it as an official city document as a list to require CEQA. Greg, how are we covered legally using a document that is not an official city document here?
Well, it was developed by someone who is a respected expert in architectural styles and historic structures. And I think staff's using it as a resource as opposed to a requirement. So it's what sets a trigger for CEQA review. So it's like a treatise or something that's out there that about a biological problem where there's a CEQA that might affect biological resources, or it might affect wildlife or something of that nature. And so I think that's why it's used as a trigger for CEQA review, and it's not used for any other purpose really at this point.
And if I could just add to that practically, CEQA generally speaks about, when it's talking about historic resources, uses 50 years as kind of a threshold of what to look at. Not saying that everything older than that is historic, but just as a general guideline. And so as staff, to have a document that even if it's not adopted, but to have properties flagged as these might be historic, I think just in practice, we go through the process because it's been flagged as a possibility. So a similar parallel might be if we were working on some sort of project somewhere and a neighbor said, oh, I've seen the dusty-footed wood rat out there. Because it's been brought up to us, we need to make sure we're analyzing it. And even though it wasn't adopted, it was prepared by people, by a historic consultant and commission. And so that's sort of how we've used it to justify looking at it under CEQA only.
Thank you. And what's the cost that an applicant would have to pay for this historian and CEQA? What is the extra cost burden there?
So we've had probably about maybe 10 of these over the past 6 or 7 years, and depending on what was proposed, it's ranged between like $600 to $2,500. So $600 was something where it's just minor exterior changes, maybe a new roof and windows or openings, and then like $2,500 was like a new house. So really looking at the project and saying this isn't a historic house.
And that's for CEQA and the historian, or is that both?
Yeah, so
that seems kind of low.
So the amount is for the historian, and once we get the historian that says this is not a historic property, or yes, it complies, then we can just say this is exempt under CEQA, and sort of like check that box. We're not preparing notices of exemption really for that.
And do you find that people are surprised that their homes are on this list, or is this a real estate disclosure that people know when they buy the house?
It is a disclosure. I'd say it's about 50-50 of people who know versus don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my final question, did people opt in when this was happening? Was there a conversation with the block of Elm Street that we're going to put you on the list? And did they opt into that? Or it was just like, I know that they were experts, but just kind of deciding among their small group that they were going to mark this block down?
I don't think we have any record of knowing either way. There's no record of anyone opting in, and there's no discussion of how they were determined.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Venkatesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I guess I'm a little confused. So there's not an ordinance, but there's a list of historical homes, correct? And somebody in 1991 listed these homes on the list. And if I guess Ms. McDonald answered some of my questions, but the historical evaluation was answered. And so if I'm purchasing a home, will I know that it's historical?
As Andrea mentioned, our hope is that it is disclosed, that the intent would be that it is disclosed, but we can't guarantee that it is. So some folks may know, some folks may not.
And would that prevent me from remodeling or upgrading my home?
It could prevent. So the interior remodels, I think aren't as much of a concern under the kind of the conversation we're having. It's more around exterior changes, but it could limit the exterior changes that a property owner is allowed to make. And our conversation is both residential and commercial, because there are also commercial properties listed in the register, or excuse me, not the register, but the report.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Councilmember Venkatesh. Okay, I had a couple questions since I brought this item up, or asked to have it considered. So I guess part of my question is, so like an example of like the property, like the Drake building, where does that fall under this? Obviously, we have some that are the Britain Hunting Lodge and some other homes that have, are on National Register. I think the train depot is. There's other things that have, that kind of historical significance. Where does sort of the Drake building fall in under this?
I would say that first, the two sites that are on the State Register of Historical Resources, and you're exactly right, is the Nathaniel Britton Party House and the depot, the railroad depot. So those are the two properties. My understanding is that the Drake Building is listed in the report, but I will defer that to Andrea, who will know off the top of her head.
Yeah, it is in the report. I think it is eligible, but I don't believe it's listed. However, I wanted to also make one point about CEQA. If a project is found not exempt under CEQA, that doesn't mean that the project can't move forward. It means that it triggers an initial review and possibly, further study. We had a very good conversation with a historic consultant last week, and she said that, a lot of times when you're getting to historic properties, and someone wants to demolish it, it's not an outright no. There's depending on why it's historic, there could be a plaque placed there, there could be photographs taken. So I just wanted to clarify that even if something is not exempt under CEQA, it doesn't mean that changes can't happen. There's just more process and mitigation measures that go with it as well. So any changes to the Drake Building, for example, which is on the primary list, I believe, would have to go through that process.
And how does the Carlos Club fit under that list? That was an issue that came up several years ago. It had a lot of public opinion on that.
Yeah, so the Carlos Club has a historic sign as well. And so with that, there were a few different things going on. One was that it had fallen into disrepair. So there was the aspect of having the property owner repair it to what it was with the lighting. But same thing, that any changes would have had to go through the CEQA review. There were definitely proposals about exterior changes to the building, and those would all have to be determined to be consistent with the interior of the Secretary standards, in addition to complying with our requirements for parking and design and all of that. And so the other sort of aspect to the Carlos Club is we have a historic sign, not really a program, but we have some historic signs that are not part of this necessarily, that were allowed to continue when the city changed its sign ordinance years ago. So property owners were able to apply and say, I have this sign, I want it to be considered historic, and we want to keep it. Mostly the neon type signs, but part of that is also maintaining them. And so the Carlos Club is a little different in that it has both a historic building, but also this extra layer of the historic sign.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know we talked earlier about the property at 211 Baytree, which was the headquarters for the Morse Ferry Seed Company. Right. And in the report, it says that property has been, it's been changed a lot since it went from the headquarters, and it didn't sort of have the same significance did before, and that now it was demolished and there's a brand new home there. So, I think there's also the flip side of things where there are homes that were on that list that maybe have changed a lot, don't necessarily need to be on that list. So I think there's, versus maybe the Drake Building, to me, I would think about there may be certain homes or certain structures that we should consider an ordinance to protect that have significant historical aspects to it for our community. And then something along the lines of maybe that 211 Baytree, it's got the location has significance, and maybe, since we own the sidewalk, you can put a disc in the sidewalk that says this is the site of X, similar to what you mentioned on some other things. So there's still ways to preserve that history of the community. But to me, I'm trying to strike the balance of, we do have some structures that remain that are of historical significance and either architecture or, something like the Drake Building, which was, related to the development of our community, that we should put some extra protections on. And so, I kind of feel like, I like all the options. Doing something that's an ordinance. I like the idea of doing the Mills Act piece, but also taking at least that list that's there and determining, maybe we do make things easier for some people by saying, what, this shouldn't be on the list anymore. We sort of, or there may be ones that would say, gosh, this is really important and we didn't know about it and we should think about it and add those protections in. So that's just kind of, as I have thought about this, trying to preserve, what we do have at this point. And if it shouldn't be on a list, then it doesn't need to be on a list. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, this has been a good study session because I think I understand it now where I didn't coming in. So really our authority here is CEQA. That's our authority. And we can look at this list, which was prepared by an expert, to help us determine if we think something deserves more review under CEQA. But that also means we're not bound by the list. If there are other properties, you know, if it happened to be the Drake building wasn't yet on that list, or maybe it sounds like the Carlos Club isn't, that doesn't stop us from also concluding that we should take a better look at this from CEQA. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's correct. And I think that, sorry, and I do want to clarify, the Carlos Club itself is on the list, but it's also on the second list. Sorry, there we go.
That was
Yeah.
just an example.
Yeah, but I think that, you know, if the city were to do a historic ordinance, that would be sort of the only way for, under the Housing Accountability Act, to have the findings to be able to deny certain projects. So the historic ordinance is going to provide the most conservative sort of restrict the most, I guess, the properties the most. The flip side of that is that we probably have quite a few single family homes, at least on the secondary list, that then would become encumbered by that as well. So
or maybe not. Because the secondary
assuming
list
there was no
I think the secondary list wasn't actually reviewed by a historical architect, right? So that was just sort of left like, hey, we think these might have some significance, but we'll get to it at some point.
Yeah, and to clarify, I was thinking if we worked on a historic ordinance but didn't change either list at all, that's when we would still probably be conservative and say we need to check this. That would be if it was the historic ordinance on its own without any updates.
Sorry, John, if I can just ask one. Could we, if we did an ordinance, right, and you've got like the list, is it like 40 properties or something? It's not 44?
In the primary list, there are 53.
Okay, and there's 19 in the others?
I did say 19, so good memory. But there are 53 properties in the primary list, and there are 38 properties in the secondary list. That number 19 is coming because in the primary list, there are 19 properties that fall within the Elm Street neighborhood.
I see.
So just the nuance of that is that of the 53 properties in the primary list, 19 are within one of the neighborhoods that was identified as having historical significance.
Okay. And as I understand, just a clarification question. So with something like SB 9, for example, if you had a house that was designated on Elm Street, for example, under historic preservation, SB 9, you could would not be allowed under that. I think there's some exemptions because I think some cities try to declare their whole city historic, right, as part of that, which I'm not trying to do here, but is that accurate?
I'd need to double check. That sounds okay. Right. I'm not sure if there needs to be a specific historic ordinance in order to do that. But
and then the only follow-up with that to John's question would be, if we were to go through the list and say, okay, let's say we're going to do the whole inventory. I mean, we could craft an ordinance potentially that, you know, doesn't include 90 homes or businesses, right? We could say, well, these are the most important from historical significance. Maybe they don't have architectural significance, and those could be on that current list why it is, and they could work with someone, but we're preserving the 10 or 12 or 15 that have the most historic significance to our community, whether it's the, you know, I don't know, the Drake building. I go back to that as an example. And you know, other homes may be of significance because of architectural pieces or other things, but they're not necessarily, you know, critical to the history of our community, right? Other than it's how they developed and there's some architectural history. Is that accurate that you could do something that way?
I think you could. I think just we have to dig into the definitions of what protection means and what the rules would be on how to evaluate once we get the study to evaluate it, and then we'd have to craft an ordinance that you know, meets the standards for property rights and viable use of the property under the Penn Central case. So that's the seminal case on historic protection. So That's what I would be interested in, making sure our ordinance complies with those standards. But I think the starting point is, what is historic and how are we going to define that, and then you could have levels of protection too that are. I think maybe that's what you're suggesting, but.
Yes, that's what I'm kind of thinking about. Are there a certain level up here that is, gosh, we really want to protect these because these are the dozen most important buildings in the community, and then there's a whole other set that we may sort of continue on what we're doing here with CEQA and other things versus adding those extra layers. So, sorry, John, I kind of cut you off on your thing.
Of course, Mr. Mayor. Of course, through the chair. I guess my question would just be, we don't have any recent living examples of a property owner not working with us through this process and accommodating I'd imagine most owners respect the historical value of their home to some extent as well.
Yeah, I can't think of any examples where it's been a problem and that someone's done something and then come in for permits later. We found out later. We're very careful in all of our systems we have to flag these properties. So we have them flagged on paper, we have them flagged electronically. I think they're flagged in our GIS, I can double check, but when anyone even just calls about an address, even if they're about to purchase a home and want to find out, that's the first thing that pops up, is this is a historic property, there's a separate process. So we really try our best to front load people. But I can't think of an example where someone's deliberately done something. Maybe fallen into disrepair in certain instances, but not, yeah.
But if an owner, say we did have an egregious owner said, I'm tearing down the Drake building to build this 24-story piece of housing with all the unlimited waivers, we could bury them in CEQA, right? CEQA remains a very powerful law that has not been usurped by all these new laws. So we still would, even though we would need an ordinance to say no, we could really make it tough on them.
So they still need the demo permit, even though, so that's flagged for building. And, Chris Valley, our building official, is very sure to let people know. So the second that happened, he would flag us. We would immediately go to Greg and say, what do we need to do to make sure we're protecting everything?
Got it.
Yeah.
But what is it, what can we do under CEQA? I mean, I guess that's really my question. I don't really know. It's onerous. It can be onerous. If we were pushing it to be onerous, are we, is it onerous? I don't even know.
It can be.
It can be. If it were to bump into a non-exempt project and we're doing an initial study in NAGDEC or even EIR.
I'll give you a couple of examples where, because it was touched on earlier, rather than potential projects involving existing buildings. Let's talk about a past project that happened. The Pacific Hacienda project, I was the deputy city attorney at the time. I sat through all the planning commission meetings, and it's true what Councilmember Collins said. There were people that were not happy with the project, the project that ultimately was built, and wanted to protect the entire Hacienda Gardens apartment, is what it was called before. And they threatened to sue us under CEQA if we approved the project. So the main issue that I see as representing the city is I don't want the city to get sued if we don't follow CEQA when we have some major project that comes in. So I think a historic resource that's on our list and is clearly historic, we would be looking at that and making sure that the city complied with CEQA, and that would be that moves it onto the applicant to comply with CEQA, and they also indemnify the city if the city gets sued on a project like that. If it's a big, even a large project that might replace a historic building, there could be some impacts from that project that would require even an EIR. So it's just going to depend on what the facts are on the case when it comes before us. So it's but I think there are things that the city can do, and CEQA is not, like was suggested. CEQA was not superseded by these housing laws, so the housing laws still do apply. I mean, the CEQA still does apply even if it's a housing project, and there is an exemption where the city to a housing project if it's going to result in a significant impact on a historic resource. And I think that was specifically written into the law because people were concerned that the Housing Accountability Act and the density bonus law could be used to demolish historic housing, and there's a lot of it in California. And you know, it's and not only historic residences, but historic structures. You know, they're in other parts of the state. In San Carlos, we don't have large properties that are significant, but we do have significant historic resources. But in other parts of the state, there's, you know, large buildings that are historic, or like the Ferry Building in San Francisco, or, you know, the Cliff House that's in the news recently. You know, there's historic buildings that would are very significant regionally, and because of the things that happened there, and you know, they get the highest level of protection when you add up all the features that make up a historic structure.
Got it. And I guess in my experience, I mean, the average, you know, almost any developer would rather not get drugged, you know, would rather work with us, I would imagine, than suffer those consequences. You know, that's what has worked to date, it sounds like.
And just, I might add, just based upon what I've seen over the years, is a lot of property owners who buy a historic structure are doing it with their eyes open and they want to preserve the historic structure. And if they want to do a remodel, they're very sensitive to making sure that, you know, the added space they're doing does not affect the integrity of the historic structure. And I know some people in town that have bought houses in the White Oaks and Howard Park area where they are extremely proud of the house that they have, and they don't want to touch it, and they want it to be as historic as possible. And so I think what we're worried about is somebody who doesn't care about any of that. So I think there is a way to craft that type of an ordinance, but so we just need direction from you to see if that's where you want us to go.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was rereading the staff report in that historical survey, and since this list is 32 years old, do we know how many of those homes that are listed there are still in existence and unaltered or demolished and replaced? I mean, there's been a lot of construction, even on those blocks of Walnut, or Elm and Walnut and other blocks.
I don't know that we know the exact number. I could say probably with certainty in the last 10 years or so that, I mean, just since that's when I've been here, I know one addition that went through on Elm went through the historic process that I worked on. We'd have to look and see sort of what's there now versus what's was originally looked at. So I'd say probably maybe the first, 10 to 15 years after this was adopted, there might be things that have changed that we're not necessarily aware of as we are more recently.
Right. Yeah. Okay, I'm just curious. Thank you.
Okay. I had one last question, just on the real estate disclosure. Is that something that we could require? If it's on that list, require real estate disclosure? I feel like I've been on some other regional boards that we've done that. We've required because you're in the airport area or other things, so that we did agree to.
I think our requiring it, I don't know, I'd have to look into that, but based on my experience, if we had an ordinance, the real estate disclosures and there may even be one that talks about that if you're, that the realtors who are involved have a standard disclosure for a potentially historic home, and it might already be happening. It might be that the owners disclose it in their transfer disclosure statement because they know it, because they have to disclose all material facts. I don't know if it's something that we can require by ordinance, because these are purely private transactions that we're not involved in. But it might be possible. I just, off the top of my head, I'm not sure we could, local government, we do that.
I'd be curious on that, because I think, as Andrea mentioned, you get about half of the people are surprised and half of the people know. So, I think trying to promote transparency among those would be helpful. But, okay. I don't see any other hands. And then I think this is a study session, so we want to get some feedback after, but I think let's do public comment now, and then we can just get sort of feedback of what direction, if any, we want to give to staff.
I don't have any speaker slips for in-person, and there are no hands on Zoom for this item.
So we'll give the public a minute or two if they want to raise their hand, and then we'll close off the public comment on Zoom.
Okay.
No hands.
All right. I will close off the public comment and bring it back to the council to see if we've been presented with a few different options. Are there any kind of thoughts from the council about how any direction we want to provide? And I will just say before we, I think the Mills Act one seems like pretty low-hanging fruit, and that's sort of promoting incentives to the, to the residences to get tax benefits. So I think that's sort of a low-cost item. So to me, at least, that's something we should, at a minimum, try and do, because it's a tax benefit potentially for residents who want to participate, and it's an opt-in option. So. Councilmember Collins.
Maybe you could give me some clarity on that. Do we need to have an ordinance to do that? Or is it just a public notification process? Is that what you're talking about?
I think for the Mills Act, it's already a state law, the reduced property tax, and you could opt into it. We have some residents who have done it and gone through that process.
So it's really just more outreach.
It's more outreach. It's more just doing the outreach to say, hey, do you want to participate in this and potentially pursue this path?
I mean, there could be a revenue hit to us as a city, of course. It is exemption of,
I suppose, but
I don't understand what it does, yeah.
Go ahead, Andrea, if you want to just answer that. Thank you.
Sure. So through the chair, the Mills Act is an opportunity for homeowners of properties that are eligible to be on the state registry to get property tax reductions. And in order to do so, they need to present a plan of proposed improvements over the next 10 years to their property with a schedule for each year what they're proposing to do, re-roof or replace windows. That's reviewed by our historic consultant to make sure that that's in line with with the standards again. And if that is something that does seem that would fit under that, the actual contract would come before council. So the contract is entered into between council and the property owner. We'd have a better idea at that time of what the financial impact would be to the city. I believe we've had 2 or 3 in the last 5 to 8 years of contracts that have actually come forward. And the city does, I believe, have the option of deciding whether to opt into it or not, into the Mills Act.
I see. So we're not required as a city to do anything under it? Is that?
We do not have to accept the Mills Act request from, it's something that the council has to approve.
Okay.
But we have approved, I think, the last 2 or 3 that have come to the council. And there's a substantial expenditure by the property owner that they have to make to restore. Sometimes it's to restore the house or to make it, make the materials match the original design. I mean, I remember one of them, we had somebody who had all these historic photos from the 1930s, and they were going to bring the house back to the way it was originally as it appearing from the street. I mean, there might have been something in the back of the house that was a little different. I can't remember what the amount of the tax relief is, but it's fairly significant to the property owner. And then to the point that was made earlier, I mean, that agreement gets recorded, so whoever was going to buy that house would be informed of that happening, because it would show up in the title report. And then if they bow out of the agreement, they have to pay back all the taxes that they would have paid, I think. So. Got it.
But since we don't have to approve it, it's up to us how much relief. So we could say we'll split the costs, or we could even decide.
It's a yes or no.
But yes to what? That we cover all the expense, or?
No, the only thing you're doing is agreeing to have the cities and it's not just the cities, it's the property tax. Maybe it is just the city because we approve it. It's agreeing to reduce the property taxes that the owner pays. Doesn't pay for all the improvements.
Okay.
It's just.
But we don't control like how much of a reduction is allowed? Do we have a say in that, or is that formulaic, or?
I think it's just a yes or no. If they're eligible for the Mills Act, you're approving the agreement.
Got it, but we can say no.
We can say no.
Yeah, so I'm comfortable, and I think outreach should be good, yeah.
All right, any other, so it sounds like, is there enough for the Mills Act piece? People are comfortable with that? Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads on that.
Is that just a postcard that we're sending, or what? That's kind of what's envisioned?
Happy to let staff kind of figure out what the best outreach is. I mean, we're not,
I'm just curious what outreach means in this case, so.
That is option 3, basically. It's part of option 3, yeah. So, go ahead, Megan. Did you just want that?
Speak to that if you would like to. We have a couple of really great methods that we can use that are to, like Mayor Rags said, low-hanging fruit. We can put it in your city council newsletter. We can put information in our Good Living newsletter. We could mail a postcard if that's of interest, or a letter. We can also do it on social media, post information on our website. We could post information on our planning application website, because that would kind of be the portal via which the whole conversation would begin. So those would be low to no cost ideas, but we could also do something larger if of interest. So
those sound good to me. I liked the planning department website. That sounds very creative. Thank you.
Okay. And it sounds like, I'm guessing on the inventory and the ordinance, people feel comfortable with the current approach and with kind of the CEQA protections, or do people feel otherwise on that? Councilmember McDowell.
Sorry. Thank you. I guess I'm a little, I feel a little conflicted about the list, our list. I drove down Elm Street today, that block of houses, and I paid a lot of attention to those residences, and they are beautiful. And I think that there is value to appreciating, historical buildings in our town. I'm uncomfortable with the top-down approach of us telling residences that you're on the list. I prefer the opt-in approach. I'm seeing how this is playing out in San Mateo, and it's very divisive. And I think that I appreciated the staff time tonight kind of talking about the costs. I do think that there's a lot of cost and time involved in having your residents listed. So the other thing that I noticed on the list, there's an old restroom facility at Burton Park that's on the list, and I walked around that today, and it's right by the youth center. It's like a little kind of brick building at the end of the turnaround parking lot.
Under the historic cell phone tower?
Yeah, right, under, our cell phone tower. And, I don't really understand why that's on the list. And then I look at properties like Nielsen's gas station that recently was sold, and we just upzoned El Camino, and I think that land is really valuable for housing, and I don't know that as a community we want to preserve an old gas station at the expense of building housing right next to the train station. So I'm shocked that the Drake building is not on the inventory. So I feel very conflicted about kind of differentiating between residential and commercial and what's on the list and adding to the list. And I'm also concerned about the staff time involved, because this seems like a very big process with historians involved and making a process for judging what should go on the list and what isn't, what shouldn't. And we're in the middle of our downtown plan and our northeast plan, and so many priorities that are currently in the hopper. So I'm sharing my concerns. I don't really have a path forward, but I am concerned about the list, and I don't know. I'm looking forward to hearing what my colleagues think. And I feel uncomfortable bringing forward an ordinance that would be based on this list when I don't have a lot of confidence in the list right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember McDowell. Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have an answer for Sarah on the Adobe building. When the youth center was proposed back in the late 90s, it was going to replace there was an old amphitheater there that had fallen into disrepair. And that amphitheater was built during the Depression along with the Adobe building. The Qantas building came later. And we had some historical preservationists that came to council meetings and basically demanded that that Adobe building be preserved. And Greg, if you remember differently, please share that. But that's
I thought we got sued then too.
There was it wasn't pleasant.
It was either sued or we got a letter threatening to sue us, which resulted in negotiation. But it was before I was the city attorney, so I don't think I was involved in it. But I do remember one of the mitigations and stipulations in the settlement was that the Adobe building be preserved.
Yeah, and I had to let go of my sentimental nostalgia because the amphitheater was where I was chosen for my Little League team, and so I had to get over that. I felt if the other people could get over the other things.
That's historic significance.
There
right
it is.
But the amphitheater is still on the list, and it doesn't exist anymore.
Because it was demolished a few years back.
So, I mean, I think there's some, I mean, my sense is there's some cleanup that needs to happen on that list regardless. And so, I mean, that's why I'm of the mindset of wanting to protect the most important stuff and kind of getting some of the stuff off that maybe doesn't need to be there anymore. But, and cleaning things up, right? There's the 2211 Bay Tree, the house doesn't exist there anymore either, right? I mean, so it's on the list, but it doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean,
Through the mayor, I'm sorry. If
Please.
I may, not to debate that the list, it does need some TLC, but I did want to mention that the Drake building is on the list. It is on the list. So this list has become mythical, but it is on the list. Yes, so just to let you know that, yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like, and let's say here, otherwise everyone's kind of struggling. I mean, we're good with the Mills Act piece and kind of still struggling a little bit with trying to figure out there's some conflict, or people are conflicted a little bit on some of these things. So, Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And first, I'll just say I appreciate the mayor's heart. I totally understand, where the concern is, and where the love of San Carlos is, and we don't want to lose what we've had. And frankly, we are in a transitionary period where a lot of change is happening and will continue to happen. So, I definitely understand why he would want to bring this forward. I appreciate it. I do share Councilmember McDowell's concerns. I think I share all of them in that number one, this would be a big exercise for staff. But moreover, it's a big exercise for our town. Between our housing element and the objective design standards, I don't think we could have made more fundamental changes to our code around housing than we've done this year. So huge change, big change. There's, and then the upzoning is about to hit, which will also be perceived as a lot of change. And I just, given that there's no recent evidence of a problem with this, and that owners have been responsible and they have wanted to work through the process, and that CEQA remains a pretty big stick, and a house or a property wouldn't even have to be on the list for us to invoke CEQA if there was something wrong with the list. I think it's just guidance to us, so we're not bound by the list in either direction. It makes me want to say, let's keep an eye on this. I'm open to considering this. I'm not sure this is the right year for it, just because of all the big change that is already happening in housing in San Carlos.
Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. Councilmember Venkatesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I echo Councilmember Vice Mayor Dugan's sentiments. I think it's a big cost for us at this time since we're redoing downtown and it's a big impact in our community. And I wish somebody from, like a historian was here to see what the impacts are to our city doing a project like this. I do want to keep the history of our city, but I just echo, I don't think it's the right time, considering all the other projects we're doing.
Okay. So I think we've heard from everyone. I think the consensus is Mills Act outreach, and then kind of leave things as are for right now, but continue to keep an eye on things as stuff progresses. Okay.
And that actually doesn't require a further council action. It's sort of a general direction to staff to appropriately publicize the Mills Act.
Yeah. So that's it. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so we have two more items. We have item 11A and B. I'm going to ask we take a 5-minute recess, and then we will come back to new business, consideration of adopting a resolution approving the 2023 mid-block crossing project C-1807 plans and specifications, and authorizing a call for bids.
So good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, Stephen Machida, Public Works Director. So as described, we're actually going to be talking about project C-1807, traffic circle and mid-block crossings, Alameda, De Los Pogos, Industrial, Crestview, and Morse. However, the item tonight is actually just going to be really talking about the mid-block crossings. So this would be at Industrial as well as Alameda, De Los Pogos. So the traffic circle item portion of this project will actually be coming to you at some future meeting. So the purpose of tonight is really to focus on the mid-block crossing, as I mentioned in the CIP project. The project really responds to public requests that staff has received for crossing enhancements on both locations at Industrial as well as Alameda, De Los Pogos. It really increases the accessibility and compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. It also improves pedestrian safety and path of travel for all users of the roadway. So the project location is at the roadway fronting 1599 and 1625 Industrial Road. Essentially, this is right near the 24-hour fitness on Industrial Road. The second location is at the intersection of Alameda, De Los Pogos at Hilltop and De Anza Avenue. And so to the upper right-hand photo that's of Industrial Road, and then the lower right-hand photo is Alameda, De Los Pogos at Hilltop. So let's talk about Industrial Road first. The installation of the improvements really is the crosswalk enhancements, including the rectangular rapid flashing beacons, the ADA compliant curb ramps, new high visibility striping and pavement markings in the street. We actually had performed a study and concluded that a mid-block crossing at this location makes sense. And then Industrial Road is an arterial roadway, and there is adequate sight distance for the crossing. So here's kind of extra the plans that shows kind of location. This is, again, in front of the 24-hour fitness between Washington and Bing. As you can see, you have a crosswalk kind of mid-block. We have what we call the shark's teeth on either side of the lane. And then in this case, this is the actual mast or poles will actually be similar to what we see in the Hawk signal, or something similar that we have near Prospect in San Carlos Avenue. So basically, it's not going to be posts right at the edge of the roadway, but it's going to be spanning across Industrial Road. And we're anticipating that the beacons should be sufficient. However, we also want to plan in case we need to do some modification where we can actually go to a Hawk-style signal. So this is the signal that's similar to Belmont and El Camino. And we won't have to do a lot of infrastructure rebuilding. So we're kind of preparing in case that we do need to change it from rapid flashing beacons to a Hawk signal style. So the next location is at Alameda, De Los Pogos. So basically, similar to what you're seeing at Industrials, you're going to have the crosswalk enhancements, including the rapid flashing beacons, ADA compliant curbs, high visibility striping and pavement markings. In addition, we're recommending red curbs on Alameda de los Pulgos for improved sight distance on Hilltop, and this is for the cars actually leaving Hilltop. Stripe and delineated curb extensions on the north side of Hilltop, only as a pilot, and really this is to kind of improve the turning movement on Hilltop onto Alameda de los Pulgos, and Alameda de los Pulgos is also an arterial. So this is another extra of the design at this location. So let's really start. So to the left, that's where Britton Avenue of the photo, and then to the right is kind of going towards Eaton. So as you can see, the crosswalk is approximately about 65 feet north of the intersection of Hilltop and Alameda. So you'd have the markings across the street, and then you have kind of the ADA curb compliant ramps in the sidewalk on Alameda. We also have the kind of the red curbs, and again, this is to provide sight distance for the pedestrians as they prepare to cross, but it also gives the drivers opportunity to see the pedestrians as they are preparing to cross the street. Kind of going southerly on Hilltop, you're going to see that black hatched area that has the little black dots, and that is essentially a pilot extension that we want to do. And the reason it's just really paint and pylons. And the reason why we want to do that is, as you kind of notice in the photograph, Hilltop is at a skewed angle with Alameda de los Pulgos. Typically, ideally, what you'd like to have is always have kind of right angles, basically just provides additional safety and provides better sight distance. But because Hilltop is at a skewed angle, we really don't have that configuration. So we have to kind of do this where we're kind of squaring it up, if you will, using kind of paint. But we're doing this kind of bulb out area simply for the reason because we're concerned as that person leaving Hilltop who wants to make a right turn and go northbound on Alameda. Typically, as a driver, you're looking to your left or you're looking from the southbound direction for cars approaching you. Unfortunately, you may not realize that there may be a pedestrian waiting to cross or about to cross or perhaps even crossing. And since the driver is not necessarily looking in that southbound direction, as they move on, it could create a conflict or, an accident. So that's the reason why we're kind of rechannelizing Hilltop out of the lane out of Hilltop so that essentially you have one car kind of proceeding either straight, left, or right. But that gives the opportunity to kind of give a little bit more attention to the crosswalk. And then as you further go south across on Hilltop, we're also recommending some red curbing along Hilltop as well as Alameda de los Pulgos. So this next slide is essentially a sight distance slide that we typically use to look at drivers, what is their sight distance as far as seeing other cars traveling on, in this case, Alameda de los Pulgos. As you can see in that kind of pink area, you have these triangles, these pink triangles, and that's what essentially the driver is see as they are parked at Hilltop. And the reason why we're asking for some of this red curbing on Hilltop and Alameda south of Hilltop is, as you can see, that pink triangle really kind of is either intersects either the curb line or is really close to the curb line or to the sight distance triangle, which means is that if there is a vehicle parked on the street at Alameda at Hilltop, basically it does provide a sight obstruction for the driver that they won't be able to see cars coming out. Now you may ask, well, why are we doing this now? Because isn't that situation similar to what we have there existing? And I said that is true. However, the big difference is that because we're adding this crosswalk, that changes the configuration of the intersection. So now that we know that there is an issue, we really have to address both. We have, because we're addressing the crosswalk, we do have to address the safety issues and the sight distance, problems. So going forward, and the reason why this location was really kind of make the determination is we were trying to kind of find crossings that are equidistant in that stretch between Britton and Eaton. So this is a photo that shows the 4 locations that we have. So kind of going from left to right or from Britton. We have an existing signal at Britton and at Alameda. Then going towards Howard, there will be a future rectangular rapid flashing beacon once at the completion of the fire station, once that's kind of constructed. And then tonight here, we're talking about Alameda at Hilltop, and so that's the 3rd kind of location. And then lastly, the 4th location is at Eaton and Alameda, and that's the 4-way stop that you see here. So as you can see, the location is pretty much equidistant. Here, however, you realize this is really a kind of 2-dimensional drawing, so you're not really seeing any of the slopes or the valleys along Alameda. So, this is the location that we really feel that was the most safe and provide, although you still have to do the modification to the intersection because of, to provide for additional protection for the pedestrians that cross at Alameda at Hilltop. So, just wanted to point out, the mid-bulk crossings is consistent with the objectives 1 and 4 in the mobility, traffic, and transportation goal in the city's strategic plan, where the objective 1 is to implement the bicycle and pedestrian master plan to encourage alternative modes of transportation and improve mobility. And objective 4 is to implement safe routes to school improvements to increase bicycle and pedestrian safety. It is also consistent with the recommendation in the bicycle pedestrian master plan. So Alameda de Las Pulgas is a priority pedestrian route. And as such, the high visibility striping pavement marking, should be done, as well as the installation of the rapid flashing beacon. In both cases, at both locations, this does, we did include these improvements. So we have had outreach for these 2 locations. So starting at the industrial road location, notices were sent to 2 adjacent property owners and 300 radius of the project. To date, we really haven't seen any comments related to the project. And then the intersection at Alameda and Hilltop, notices were sent to the 13 property owners as well as the 300-foot radius. We sent approximately 140, I believe it's 140 letters and postcards, kind of informing of our intentions of what we were going to do. Some of the concerns that we heard is, they had interest in increasing the public safety along the corridor, particularly turning moves, and as well as driveway access. They're interested in reducing the speed in Alameda de Las Pulgas, including coordination with Redwood City. And they do support the crosswalk with concerns of the parking removal on Alameda de Las Pulgas, south of Hilltop Drive. And then just recently, we also heard an objection of the crosswalk from the resident at 1583 Alameda, where she objected to the location of the crosswalk directly would impact her property and the loss of 1 on-street parking space. So this is the estimated timeline for the project, basically, and again, these are the 2 locations. So basically, in winter of 2022, we started performing some of the technical studies, and then through spring and summer, fall, we had the consultant on board to start preparing the design, the 65-95% design, with 100% design being completed in summer of 2023. We started the outreach process. We also went to the Planning and Transportation Commission to actually share the design, and we actually heard from the Planning Commission to actually make some modifications or some adjustments. And then we're here tonight before the council requesting that you approve the plans and specs, and then authorize to go out to bid. So one thing I did want to stress as the Public Works Director, while the staff really does understand the concerns that we heard from the neighbors about losing on-street parking, it is something that, you do have to try to find a balance. However, and as I mentioned, when we did speak to the Planning and Transportation Commission, there are some design conflicts that we were able to kind of design around. In other words, we were able to eliminate a bulb out across the way on Hilltop Road. But there are certain design requirements that we just couldn't overlook, basically because it cost, would be a safety concern, and it really doesn't meet our professional engineering standards. And as such, staff is strongly recommending that you approve the mid-bob crossing as designed and presented tonight to ensure public safety. Oops. Sorry. So our recommendation is really to adopt a resolution approving the 2023 mid-bob crossing project, C1807 plans and specification, and authorizing a call for bids. And again, this is just for the 2 locations of the mid-bob crossing location. It does not include the traffic circle portion of this project, CIP project. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm glad it doesn't cover the traffic circle, because I would have to recuse myself from this whole thing, or at least from that part. Okay, thank you for the presentation. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Vice Mayor Dugan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Steve, and appreciate the overview and the work that went into this, and the outreach in particular to the community. Why are these projects in particular coming forward? I know there's a lot of stuff we could do in town. Was there a particular impetus for these 2 projects?
Well, the staff has received requests, for additional crossings at both locations, both in Industrial and Alameda. It was kind of on our work schedule, and so we wanted to bring it forward. Typically you don't want to wait for too long as things are moving forward. So it was kind of time to bring forward, and so we had the designer on contract already, and they were preparing the plan. So we felt it was really time to bring forward.
Got it. Yeah, no, I mean, these sorts of improvements are certainly in line with, our goals that we've set and et cetera. But what put these at the top of the list? Is there just that there was folks were asking for it here, or were these noted by staff as particularly dangerous situations?
Well, it was really kind of generated mostly by the public who, the community who wanted the crossings.
Okay. And then I too have heard the concerns about the parking in the neighborhood. And, obviously no one wants to lose parking that they're used to in front of their own home. Does this neighborhood have any parking impacts? I mean, is there a lack of street side parking available in this neighborhood? Have we looked at that? Like, if we take out these spaces, are they now going to struggle to park in their neighborhood?
Well, I mean, probably similar to most locations in the city, we do have kind of a really issue with kind of on-street parkings. But certainly, if we were to kind of red curb this, I would anticipate that, that parking would be, parking is a premium, and they would have to park somewhere
And did we
else.
actually look at that? I only say that because my impression is that there is actually ample parking in that area, but I'm just curious if we took a formal look at that or not.
We haven't done an official inventory, but the several site visits that the staff has made and the consultant has made shows that there is enough parking available, that this would not be enough of a concern to do a formal study.
I see. Okay. So we did look at it enough to know that there is generally parking available in the area.
Yeah, it's not like some other locations where it's pretty much 95% parked all the time.
That's consistent with my understanding of that neighborhood too. All right. Thank you. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. Councilmember Venkatesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Steve. I just want to disclose I have met with the residents, and I have looked at the area. So my question is, do these homes have garages for the parking situation?
I believe they do have garages, yes.
This is not time for public comment. Can you please be respectful in the back? Thank you. Is that, sorry, did you get the answer to your question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Stephen, for the presentation and all the work that's gone into this. A few questions. I noticed that the data that was collected was done over one day, and it was a weekday, not a weekend when perhaps there would be more pedestrians crossing. And I also noticed that the site evaluation conducted by WTrans on February 25th, 2022 was actually during ski week when kids were out of school and potentially people were traveling. So I'm wondering, I feel like when we usually do these studies, they're over several days. Am I not recollecting that correctly, or why was it just one day?
So actually, may I have Hanya Houshmandi actually respond?
They are typically done over one typical day. It would be very costly to do it over several days. The only studies that we do over several days are speed counts, where we look at 7 days or 5 days or 3 days, depending on the location. If it's closer to retail or the beach, where the weekend activity would be higher, we would look at weekends. But typically, industry standard is just one weekday.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, is it true that on Alameda, going one way, the speed limit is 30, and going the other way, the speed limit is 25? And can you talk to that discrepancy on Alameda, please?
So you are correct. So basically in this location at Hilltop, going southbound, in the southbound direction on Alameda, that's in the city of Redwood City, and that's at 25 miles per hour, or posted at 25 miles per hour. At the same location, kind of going northbound, that portion of the road is in the city of San Carlos, and that is posted at 30 miles an hour. So it's a little bit different in that, well, I won't say a little bit, it is different. And that's how the posted speed limits were set. It's at 30, and actually I believe via the ordinance, the municipal code ordinance, the ordinance in the city actually had this portion or this segment of Alameda posted in San Carlos at 30 miles an hour. And this, I believe it was 1976.
And so under California, like traffic law, how do we have a standing when there's two different, that seems very confusing from a public safety and enforcement perspective, because we're talking about two different speed limits on the same road.
I think because it's covered in two different cities.
Right.
It's unfortunate. Typically, ideally, it's best to have the city limit lines either fully engulfing entire city street. In this case, it happened to be the center line is the city limit lines between the two cities.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then my final question is, I too have talked with a few residents, and what I've been hearing is that a major concern that the residents have expressed is speeding on Alameda, and one resident refers it as the Alameda Speedway. Do we have a plan to take a comprehensive look at Alameda, either between San Carlos Avenue and Edgewood, or between Britton and Edgewood? That hill, people pick up a lot of speed. This is something that I've continually heard. So are we going to look at that corridor holistically at any point?
Answer that.
So we plan to do a corridor study along this segment of Alameda that would look at things holistically, and with the objective of hopefully being able to reduce the speeds somewhat, because realistically, you're not going to reduce the speed unless you kind of change the design of the roadway. The roadway as it is designed now, it kind of invites you to go fast, and it doesn't do anything to prohibit you from going fast. And since we can't change the speed limits with the tools that we have now, the only way would be to do a corridor study, do a collective, hopefully in coordination with Redwood City, and we would do a complete street design, and it would have elements that would naturally reduce the speed.
Okay, and that would, that study would go from where to where? From Britain to Redwood City, or?
We would like for it to go through Redwood City as well, because this is an arterial roadway. It carries a lot of traffic, and if we just do our portion and their portion stays as is, it's not going to be as effective.
Okay, I mean, I care mostly about what's happening within our city boundaries, so.
Absolutely, but that little piece south between Eaton and Edgewood is all Redwood City, and what happens in that little area really impacts our section as well.
Right, I remember. And I'm sorry, and then the study would start at Britain or at San Carlos Avenue?
We would have to look at that and to see what would be the best location to start it once we have a consultant on board to determine what the borders should be.
And your time frame for that?
The way we have it right now, it's probably about 3 years out, based on the list of projects that we have. But, you know, things change all the time.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember McDowell. Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for clearing up the speed limit differential. So that side of the street, Hillway, that's all Redwood City to the border, right?
Not to the border.
I know it's.
Not to the border. There's a triangle.
There's a triangle, but actually part of Eaton. If you go up Eaton and some of that area on the west side of Alameda is Redwood City, correct?
If you look at that red line, anything's.
Yeah, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, that little kind of.
Correct, and that goes all the way down. So, but our speed limit northbound is 30 miles an hour.
That's correct.
And Hani, is that the way I pronounce it? Hani, okay. What's the process if we would desire to change, since we control only our side, our speed limit from 30 to 25?
So you would need to do a speed study that would measure what the 85th percentile speed, or prima facie, is, which is the speed that 85% of vehicles are going at or below. Then a traffic engineer would issue something called an ATS report, and the engineer only has a 5 mile per hour discretion. The last speed check on this segment of Alameda was 35 miles an hour. So the traffic engineer has they can bring it down by 5 miles based on engineering judgment, but not beyond that. State law does not allow us to go beyond 5 miles an hour. So at the moment, we don't really have a legal mechanism to bring down the speed limit from 30 to 25. Unless we change the design of the roadway, we introduce some geometric elements that will naturally bring down the 85th percentile to a point where we could use the 25 to reduce it.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, because I think that's really important. And if we were going to do, we're talking about doing a comprehensive study of Alameda. And by the way, if we're going to do it, let's do it from San Carlos Avenue to Eaton. That just, it doesn't make any sense to stop it at Britain. Besides, we may have a development along Alameda between Melody, right, Rockridge, and San Carlos Avenue that could eventually impact things. So my feeling is if we're going to have a full study, let's do the whole corridor. And would that study include this speed study as well? Would it be just part of it?
It would look at everything. It would look at speeds, geometry, sight distance, need for pedestrian and bicycle facilities, what's in the bike ped master plan. It would be a complete street study for the whole corridor.
Okay. And don't go away. I think this next question's for Stephen and I, because I talked to him last week about this. These two projects, Industrial and Alameda, they're sort of married in this agenda item. If we make one decision on one, we can divorce it from the other, right? We can just say, look, we're okay with Industrial, but we want to either deny or approve or make changes to the Alameda portion of it, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay. All right. The other thing I noticed, and same disclosure as Councilmember Venkatesh, I also met with property owners yesterday, and I also walked all the way down to Howard. I walked all the way back up, and I'm glad that you are showing this, because when I looked at it just from my, uneducated mind with regard to traffic, it seemed like a very logical place to put a crosswalk would be where Ridge comes in, because it's completely flat there. But again, that's just, my layman's look at it. The other thing that comes to mind is that if we make the change here, and then we embark on this long, holistic study, which includes potentially slowing traffic down, by changing the configuration of the road, is it possible that when it's all said and done, that we may decide that the decision we made on this particular crosswalk may not have been the best fit, given the changes we might be making down the road? Is that a possibility?
That certainly is a possibility. If in fact, the direction is for a council is to actually do the corridor study, I would suggest that we, although I think this project should still move forward, but it is something that you want us to study the corridor, to do the corridor study, I would suggest that we do this first and pause this location for the mid-block crosswalk.
Okay, that's what I was wondering about. Hannah, you also mentioned that, the traffic studies like a one-day thing, and that speed studies are multiple-day things. Are you aware of instances where traffic studies did occur over multiple days and where the data didn't really make a difference? In other words, it was no more valuable than a one-day study?
Yes, and that is the reason that typically we don't do it more than one day, because you would waste a lot of money and come up with not so significant different results.
That makes sense. And, Mr. Mayor, I apologize for having all these questions, but I
think you've got, you've saved up, Ron, from earlier today. You're good.
Thank you. And then I'm wondering, and I realize I get the whole public safety thing and the warrants and all that, because we've gone through that. I've been through that several times before. What are the implications? It might even be a question for Greg. What are the implications of going through with this planned project, but eliminating some of that red curbing as some residents want?
So the implication would be safety, because folks that are turning out of Hilltop and folks that are in the crosswalk will have much more limited visibility. So if there is a car parked in one of those three red zone areas, you're cutting the sight distance in half or 1/3, and that's simply not enough time for a vehicle to stop if they're going at 30 to 35 miles an hour, which is what they are doing. So the 250 feet that is required by Caltrans for sight distance is the minimum amount of footage that you would need to use to stop in time before you get into a crash. So we really don't have any ability to reduce that to save these parking spaces. We're already using a discretion to bring it down to 25. Typically, we have to use corner sight distance, which is much larger. But Caltrans allows for locations with constraints, which this certainly is a location with constraints, to go to stopping sight distance, which is 250 for Alameda de las Pulgas. So we really can't go below that and not compromise safety.
And if we ignore various portions of this plan and implement others, I would assume that there's now liability to the city if we don't do it exactly the way that has been recommended.
Yeah,
I think I know the answer, Greg, but I just like you to...
I'm glad to answer the question.
Say it.
Basically, the city loses, or I shouldn't say loses, could lose design immunity if the engineering plans are, if the plans are not approved by an engineer. So if you deviate from the standards that are described by staff, there would be a risk that if a claim came out a result of the crosswalk being there and somebody not being able to stop, they'd go, well, you deviated from the standard, and we would not have design immunity, which we would have for the project as designed, with the engineering, with the approval of the engineers and the council's approval.
Okay, thank you. That's the answer I expected to hear, but I thought it was good to have it out there. All right, that's all I have.
All right. Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That triggered a follow-up question for me. So, Crystal, I don't know if you can put up the red curb diagram, but I'm a little confused if the red curbing, there, yeah, you had it, that's past Hilltop. I understand, well, I have two questions. The red curbing that's past Hilltop in front of the residences, that's due to sight distance for the crosswalk or sight distance for the car that could potentially be turning left?
It is for the cars.
Cars turning left.
Right.
Okay.
Well, the cars coming out of Hilltop.
Right. And then, because I don't recall red curbing that far for any of our rapid flashing beacons along Britain, for example. So that's because there wasn't this turning, this intersection. Okay. And then the red curbing that's around the crosswalk, that's specifically related to the crosswalk itself, so pedestrians can be seen. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember McDowell. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick follow-up. On this diagram, so on Hilltop, those are temporary pylons to basically force a single car to be more prominent in the intersection. That's what we're doing there?
Well, it's that, as well as to permit that right turn movement going northbound, right? Because currently what could happen without those pylons is the car who wants to, let's say, go southbound on Alameda, another car wants to go northbound, they could kind of squeak by.
Yeah.
And then, again, as you mentioned, they'll be looking left or looking for the southbound cars, and then just knowing that there's a gap there, they could move, and then they proceed going northbound, not really perhaps paying attention that there could be a pedestrian in the crosswalk.
That makes sense. And you described that as temporary structures. So what like, we run the experiment, we conclude it works. What is that going to look like in 3 years?
In all likelihood, we would probably want to put some type of permanent feature, whether it be like a curb extension or a concrete curb, island. To prevent.
Would that be landscaped? Can things like that look nice, or is that going to be an eyesore now?
Certainly that can be done. I mean, this could be an opportunity to provide, like a bioswale with, the natural grasses and things. So.
Okay. Yeah, we definitely wouldn't want to leave an eyesore like that indefinitely. So, all right. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. I had a couple questions. I did also meet with some of the residents, and I used to live off of De Anza for a few years, so I'm well familiar with that intersection. And I guess I appreciate the idea about doing this sort of more full corridor study. I think that's important to do around this. I do think that this whole area you've got hilltops and everything else. It is a challenge. And I guess with regards to the red curbing and things, even I'm just concerned, like thinking if I'm making a left-hand turn out of De Anza, or even that right-hand turn, I mean, I'm struggling with the safety around that crosswalk there. Because it's somewhat, you've got trees there, it's a little bit of a blind turn to do. And I'm just, I mean, did we look at other locations? I know this is sort of fits the sort of balancing out of where the crosswalks are, or, I mean, and if we did a corridor study, could we look at sort of a full stop sign there to kind of slow traffic? Would that be something that could be out of a corridor study? I'm just, I don't know, I'm just kind of struggling with this location. I understand you guys did a lot of work on this, and I appreciate that, but I wanted to sort of get that feedback from you.
So, as I mentioned kind of in starting out the presentation, certainly kind of these streets that we have in town, when they come in at a skewed angle, that always presents a problem as far as, traffic safety and, the crossings. So this is kind of one area that is certainly a challenge, right? Hilltop on either side, as well as De Anza, where the streets come in at a kind of a skewed angle. So certainly we could look at other locations. However, a concern and my fear is if we look at other locations, assuming it fits with, the safety issues, is will we have a similar type of complaints or concerns, right? And then at what point, how do you really make that decision? And that's always going to be a challenge. However, as Hanya had mentioned, if in fact we do the corridor study, we're going to look at a lot of different things. Whether we could actually install, like a 4-way stop or a 3-way stop, that's certainly a possibility. Just my gut reaction, but I'm not the traffic engineer. My gut reaction is probably it wouldn't meet warrants.
I'll hold you to that.
Yeah, it probably would not be warrant for a full-way stop, but you never know. Right, it is something that we probably have to look in. So I don't really want to try to design something here. I think it's it is complicated enough that it is something that we probably want to look at it a little bit more closely. As as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at a 2D drawing, right? But we really do need to take into account the kind of the slopes and the other kind of geometrics within this corridor to really make that determination of how best to serve the crossing.
Okay, thank you. I guess I know we've talked about the study. There's been some questions raised, and I'm just concerned that we've got such a funky intersection here to try and put a crosswalk here and do all this engineering around work. To me, I would rather, and I don't know what my colleagues feel like, I would rather move forward to approve the industrial road one and kind of hold back on this one if we're going to do a corridor study and not sort of redo multiple things. Let's do it all at once, make sure we check things. If we can do speed changes that would impact things, potentially look at other more traditional intersections as well. That would be my inclination to do that. I'd be curious how my colleagues feel about it. I know Ron asked that question. So I'd kind of pose that if people would be open to moving forward with one and kind of holding off on the other right now. Councilmember Venkatesh, and then Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Stephen, for your work on this. I know it takes a lot. I think this is a complex problem, and it takes more than a day worth of a study. And we're doing the Eaton project, so I'm happily do the industrial one and just do a larger study on this after we do the Eaton development, maybe. That's my thoughts.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, that was my thoughts.
No, you're fine. Sorry about that.
Look at this later. That's okay. To look at this later, because I do think it's complicated. Just looking at it over here and looking at Envision yesterday, it's such a complicated problem. I don't think it's a one-step kind of solution. And having a crosswalk, I'm a proponent of stop signs, because even the crosswalks that we have, they flash a lot and there's nobody there. Some kids will come and just, push the button and there's nobody there. So I don't know if that's a solution here. I do like stop signs, to be honest, because people do stop. So I'm fine with industrial because I've crossed that before and it's hard to cross. But this is complicated. You've got hills, you've got blind spots, and it needs a bit more fine tuning, I guess.
Okay. Good.
And I do appreciate the comment. This staff has spent a lot of time, to kind of vet kind of things. And as I mentioned, we have done outreach. We have kind of met with Planning Commission. This is the kind of location that we really feel, will satisfy the needs, and with the design changes that would actually kind of create a safe location for crossing. However, knowing that this is very complicated, and as you may have spoken to some of the neighbors here, and certainly we have as well, it is something that they're very concerned about, and it is something that we just have to have a balance. However, as I mentioned earlier, when it really does become safety as part of the person responsible for the safety of our roads, I have to take this very seriously, and so then therefore, if we do. If we do move forward with this project, I would again strongly recommend that we construct it as it is designed.
Thank you, Stephen. And I don't think anyone, at least over here, based on disagrees with if we did move forward that we need to do what needs to be done to make sure it's safe. I think that's would be the view from the dais. I think the question is, if we're going to be doing this bigger corridor study and other things, should we wait? Is that really the best spot? Can we look at some other things? as part of it. And I guess we'll see where everyone is. I also want to be, Councilmember McDowell reminded me, I mean, we've got members of the public who have been here. I do want to give them an opportunity to kind of to speak. They've been very patient. It's 10 o'clock, so let's do that first, and then we can come back and decide which the best way to go is. So I know we have a number of public comments in person. Maybe we can do that first, since individuals have been patient and do that. So let's start with in person.
So we have 7 speaker slips in person. First up is Mara Violanti, and then you'll be followed by Christopher Violanti.
And just as a reminder, you have 2 minutes.
I'll read this. My name is Mara Violanti, a San Carlos property owner and taxpayer for the past 16 years. First, I want to thank the council members for spending time speaking with me about my concerns about the mid-block crossing project along Alameda. I have strong concerns over the project. It was shocking when I opened the link to your council packet on Thursday to find pages of information that city employees have not disclosed to me or my neighbors. Even tonight, I discovered more. Since none of the paperwork indicated that staff alerted the Safe Routes to Schools Committee, I asked for their review of the situation. This included not only San Carlos School District, but the Redwood City School District and Sequoia Union High School District. Please do not misunderstand. I am 100% for pedestrian safety crossing Alameda. As the traffic has no stops from Eaton to Britain, people drive like they own the road. I've never once seen someone get a ticket on Alameda in 16 years. Yet, a one-day traffic study indicated people go well over the posted speed limit. Speed limits aside, I see pedestrians crossing daily, and never do I see anyone crossing in that particular spot. Why? Because it's too hard for pedestrians to see oncoming traffic and vice versa. Most people cross where they can see traffic. Not only is a crosswalk in one of the worst spots on Alameda due to visibility issues, to compensate, the plan drafted includes red zones eliminating all parking in front of my home. Yes, there may appear to be spots to park, but if I have my elderly parents come, they have to walk a long way just to get to my home. This devalues my property, and by removing cars, you're actually increasing speed because there's no impediments. Using the one-day traffic study, the staff are suggesting that red zones are necessary as cars go nearly 10 miles per hour over the posted speed limit and need 250 feet to stop. However, if the speed is in limit is enforced, or better yet, matches the southbound traffic to 25 miles an hour, such a long stopping distance would not be necessary, thus a red zone would no longer be necessary. So to reiterate, please do not proceed with this.
Thank you, Mara. Is it Chris?
Yes, next up
Valenti
is
next?
Christopher, and then you'll be followed by Deborah Chow.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Violante. I live at 1619 Alameda, and I've been a homeowner for 16 years. I would like to point out that, as we learned in the Planning Commission meeting in September, there was a warrant study for this crosswalk, and it was not warranted. But they want to move forward with it anyway, with the thought process being that if they install a crosswalk, people will use it. My concern is that if you install a crosswalk in an area that has poor visibility, you're encouraging people to cross that point, so you don't need to go to where it's flat and you can see this is where we're telling you to cross. If somebody were to be struck in that crosswalk, there could be some serious repercussions to the city because this is where you're telling people to cross. Just the fact that there's such extensive no parking zones, to me, indicates this is not an area conducive to a crosswalk. If you take the crosswalk at Britain and Tamarack, there's a 1-foot red zone and a 3-foot red zone, and that's it. And the reason being is there's much better visibility. So my thought is if you could move the crosswalk north, like maybe by Ridge or Wildwood, somewhere in that area, the visibility would be much better, and you could have this crossing without inconveniencing residents and lowering their property value with extensive red zoning. So safety is definitely a concern. I have no problem with the crossing. I just have a problem with this location. I just don't think it's the best location on Alameda. And I would respectfully request that you vote this project down. And if we want to look at a crossing, that we find a more appropriate location. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Sure, we can do that.
Is that Connie? Connie Chow?
That's fine.
My name's Connie Chow. I'm the owner, resident of 1583 Alameda. I'm here tonight to voice my concerns for the safety of pedestrians at the proposed Alameda Hilltop Crosswalk project and to voice my strong opposition to it as it is written. Based on the city's own study, there were only 4 people crossing Alameda on the day the study was done. The reason for this low number is due to the high volume and speed of the cars. Even if the crosswalk was installed where proposed, it would not change the behavior of all the high-speed drivers. A crosswalk at the proposed location would only give pedestrians a false sense of security. Luring more people to cross at this intersection is just an accident waiting to happen. If the goal is to improve the health and safety of San Carlos residents, why has there not been a more thorough and comprehensive study of the whole section along Alameda to find the safest location for a crosswalk? And has the health and well-being of the residents at the Alameda Hilltop area been considered? Several property owners, including myself, would lose the parking spaces adjacent to our properties due to the proposed red curbing. The number of people observed crossing Alameda does not even meet the number needed for a warrant. So why is the city putting in all this effort just to disrupt the residents' enjoyment of our properties, decrease the desirability of our homes, and lower our property values? I urge the city to cancel this proposed project and come up with a win-win solution for all residents of San Carlos, pedestrians and residents alike. Thank you.
Thank you, Connie.
Deborah Chow, if you'd like to speak, approach the podium, and then you'll be followed by Stephanie Hendrickson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Deborah. I am Connie's daughter. I, too, would like to voice my objection to the proposed crosswalk at Alameda. I'm going to belabor all of the points that you have continually heard, but I think that it's important that they just be spoken again and again because these are points that are salient to all of us. Point number 1, this is an inherently dangerous intersection. It is the convergence of 5 directions of traffic. Your own engineers have acknowledged that this is a challenging intersection. According to Hania, when we met, she said there was quote unquote nothing safe about it. Instead of performing due diligence, your engineers have spent countless hours to find the most optimum place for a crosswalk and the absolute least optimum place without investigating safer alternative locations. Point number 2, this is again not a warranted crosswalk as indicated in your report. The assumption that more pedestrians will cross the intersection of one is in place is misguided at best and dangerous at worst. The natural contours and traffic patterns of this intersection are not conducive to pedestrian visibility, even giving the flashing signs that are proposed. Additionally, placing an unwarranted crosswalk in a busy, low visibility intersection has the added danger of giving unfamiliar pedestrians a sense that it is safe to cross. Meanwhile, traffic will continue as it always has, with half of the driving population exceeding the speed limit by 5 to 10 miles beyond what is posted, and it is an accident and lawsuit waiting to happen. Point number 3, you are negatively impacting the lives of the homeowners surrounding this intersection. In our case, the red zones directly in front of our house will not only impact our property value, but more importantly than money, it will mean that our disabled relatives will now need to either park a significant distance away from my mother's home or not visit at all. So not only are you impacting a senior citizen who lives in that home, but you're impacting the health and safety of the elders that are visiting the community. In closing, I'd like for you all to ask yourselves this: is the minimal, infrequent utility of this dangerous crosswalk more important than the daily, life-changing negative impact that you are proposing to enact on not only senior citizens, but disabled visitors? I too urge you, yes, I too urge you to cancel the proposed project and find a better, safer solution that exemplifies San Carlos as the city of good living.
Okay, thank you.
Stephanie Hendrickson, you'll be followed by Roy Hendrickson.
council members. I stand before you as a resident, taxpayer. My husband and I have lived here in San Carlos since 1981 and raised 3 sons. During that time, we asked the city multiple times about helping us slow down the speed, even back then, about putting in crosswalks and/or 3-way stop signs down in the St. Francis area or Ridge. And we were told back in the day that because Redwood City was on the west side and we were on the east, they didn't communicate. Well, over 40 years, I would think 2 cities should be able to communicate to discuss the safety of residents. It just boggles the mind. So in terms of the crosswalk, I also agree, and I'm not going to reiterate what everyone else said. It isn't safe. I sit outside, I'm on 1607, which is at the top of the knoll, and people coming up St. Francis North hit speeds after Eaton. It's like the green light. It can hit 40 or more on that top of that roadway. People are making left turns going left on either Hilltop West or De Anza. People go around them. They don't want to stop behind them. They go around. And that cutout where they want to put that temporary thing coming down Hilltop will force the people coming down Hilltop into the oncoming right-hand people turning. Are you following what I'm saying in terms of? We're going to have crashes. We have lived here, as I told you, since '81. There's never been an accident. We've not had a fatality up there. But you put that crosswalk, you are going to have pedestrians hit, and you're going to have car accidents because it is going to be a conversion of people crashing on their brakes because they can't see. All of a sudden, there's a light flashing. My time's up.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Roy Hendrickson, and then you'll be followed by Bill Eichner.
Okay, hi, my name is Roy Hendrickson. I live on the Alameda right there at the same house for 42 years. I've worked as a pharmacist on the El Camino Walgreens for 20 years. I coached Little League and AYSO soccer for 8 years, and I volunteered at the senior center helping the elderly with their medications to help them through the COVID and everything else when they were confused. So what I'm saying is I believed in the city of good living, and I've tried to make that happen. But this city has lied to us over the years. We've asked 32 years for a crosswalk to be put to slow down traffic. We were told they can't be done. That was a lie. We've been told so many things over the years, and it's all been lied to us. And now it's come down, you're popping this intersection at the wrong spot. And it feels like you feel like you have to do something, so let's put it here without thinking. Like my wife said, people turn around in these cars and they're gonna hit and they're gonna go up on our curb or whatever. So this is the city of good living. We got to use our heads, not the typical government response saying, well, we have to do something for safety and safety. Let's do it because it's the right thing to do. Steve, we met with him and he said, where are we going to park? He said, park in your garage. Well, Steve, we all have 1-car garages. We all have 2 or 3 cars. I am disabled. I have a placard. I have to park up the street and I have to walk down. That's an ADA thing. And also, you're going to put more parking. I have had letters left on my windshield telling me I'm a bad neighbor for parking in front of their house. I can show you these letters. Also, the city has screwed up the intersection in front of our house. They said we have to put a mat for the handicap in front of your house because there's nowhere else to put it. Well, the thing's always underwater. It doesn't go there, but they had to put it somewhere. And that's what's happening here. It has to go somewhere, and it's the wrong spot.
Thank you, Roy.
Bill Eichner. And that's our last speaker slip for in person, so if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand after Bill.
Hi, my name is Bill Eichner. I'm not going to reiterate everything. A couple things. It seems like they're trying to turn one project into two with that intersection and the crosswalk. Again, I echo what everybody's been saying. I do have concerns about the transparency throughout this process. So I hope whatever happens in the future, it's more inclusive and there is more transparency to what's going on. I don't understand the site distancing and the gentleman spoke earlier, that elevation on there, the picture, the two-dimensional, doesn't really give a good sight line of what the whole project is. So that should be part of the future when they bring it up. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. All right, Crystal, let's see if there's any comments online.
Yes, we do have 3 hands.
Okay.
And then we'll limit that. So the first up is Alistair Jeffs.
Okay.
Should be able to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. My name is Alistair Jeffs, board member of Art Bias, which is based on Industrial Road. And I'm the current president of the Industrial Arts Business Association, which borders Industrial Road. I'm here to convey our support for the crosswalk being considered on Industrial Road between Washington Street and Bing Street. And I hope this initiative can be separated from the Alameda Hilltop project and be voted on today. With parking a challenge for many of the businesses immediately in the district and the increased activity with the Domenico's restaurant and Industrial, this crosswalk will provide the vital safety for those who need to or want to cross Industrial Road for parking or other reasons. It will also be a contributor to making the Industrial Arts District more accessible for people, customers, and employees. The Industrial Arts Business District strongly encourages the council to approve this initiative, which will make a difference in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. And Crystal, you said we have 2 more speakers there?
Yes.
Can you make a last call for public comment online?
There are only 3 speakers. So
Okay, perfect. 3 people left on the call? Okay, perfect. All right, thank you.
So next up is Kevin Mellinger. Able to unmute?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Kevin Meilinger. I live at 97 Hilltop Drive. Here to support our neighbors on the opposing the Alameda Mid-Block Crossing project. First and foremost, I think one of the biggest reasons why I personally oppose the project too is because the Violantes have such limited parking on Alameda. I can only imagine them having to back out of the driveway on a busy, Monday morning trying to get the kids to school and only to be met with severe traffic coming up and down Alameda. At least now they have access to 1 or 2 spots on Alameda so they can kind of pull out into traffic compared to having to pull in, pull out of their driveway, which is a major, major safety concern. And having a 15-month-old that's going to be growing up here in San Carlos as well, I would be concerned with that myself. The second biggest reason I would say is the lack of data. You can tell just by the objections that you're hearing this evening and objections that the team has gotten throughout the last couple of months that the lack of data is a big concern. If we're going to try to put real safety measures in place, we should have real data and not have it just be backed up with I feels and I coulds and it woulds. It does feel that the project team is married to this location, but without a real reason why. Last but not least, in good spirit and being a San Carlos resident here, owning my home with my wife for the last couple of years and many more to come, I do believe that there are better alternatives, better locations, and the other locations that currently do have crosswalks and stop signs, etc. They don't have this much infringement on red zoned curbs. Last but not least, thank you so much for everybody's time. And hope we can come to a good conclusion.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. And then the last hand is from Steve. You should be able to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. My name is Steve Robinson. Before I begin my 2 minutes, can you put up the drawing that with the red sight lines?
Sure.
So that I can refer to it. Okay, first of all, my name is Steve Robinson. I live
Steve,
at
if you want to
96
just hold on for 1 second, because your time's going to start going unless, why don't you,
okay.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead now.
Okay, so my name's Steve Robinson. I live at 96 Hilltop Drive. I've lived there for 21 years with my family. I've worked as a police officer for 14 years with the city of San Mateo and was a traffic officer in a community policing for 6 years of those. And I also retired from the San Mateo County District Attorney's office as a DA inspector. So I have a little background with this, and I agree with all my neighbors. I do oppose the crosswalk location, and I won't go into too much of that. But I did want to talk about a little bit about this bollards and the curb extension at Hilltop and Alameda. And first of all, building out the north curb line of Hilltop is dangerous and will create a hazardous situation for drivers. These are the reasons why. You're now creating a driver to make a right turn at a 90-degree angle on a low visibility, uncontrolled intersection where currently the distance and visibility is a lot clearer and easier to operate a motor vehicle. The sight distance from the crest of northbound Alameda towards the Hilltop intersection is approximately 120 feet. The average driver takes approximately 4 seconds to make a right-hand turn to accelerate their vehicle to a straight line. At this intersection, you need to do that even faster. This time dramatically improves if a vehicle is already at a stop sign at an angle. The speed limit at this intersection is 30 miles per hour. Per the U.S. Department of Transportation, the average driver takes 1.5 seconds to process an object, pedestrian, or vehicle that is stopped in a roadway. That begins the braking process. The average distance to stop a vehicle safely at 30 miles per hour is 119 feet. With 120 feet of sight distance, 4 seconds to accelerate a vehicle, the average driver now has to pull from that limit line, and the potential of vehicle stopped at a crosswalk, you are giving that average driver 1 foot of room to avoid a collision. Now with the crosswalks approximately 80 feet away from that new extension of Hilltop, this just creates more danger and it creates more problems for the drivers that are stopped. Not only do I oppose the crosswalk, but building out Alameda and making that intersection smaller is even more dangerous for vehicles.
Steve, can I ask you to wrap up, please?
Yeah. No problem. And the last thing I would just want to say is that there needs to be a speed study. Nothing has been on the speed study, and some of the language that is being used, like the quote, "We need to take into account the slopes."
Do need you to wrap up, Steve, please.
Okay, I'll wrap up with that. I think you've heard enough from my neighbors, and I appreciate your time. And one last thing, Mayor Rack, you know from driving out of that De Anza intersection that you need to get on the gas of your vehicle to avoid speeding cars. So that's the last thing I want to say. Thank you guys very much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, that's all the public comment that we have. Let me bring it back to the council now. We had Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I heard from the callers that this particular project doesn't have warrants. Did I mishear that? I thought there were.
Warrants for crosswalks are not the same as warrants for a stop sign. They're not really warrants. They're typically kind of like guidelines. They counted the existing pedestrians when they did the study, and the study reported that based on the number of destinations, this being within 10-minute walk shot of White Oaks Elementary, all the other destinations, the anticipation is there is demand. People are just too scared to cross. So they anticipated that that it is warranted once you address it. Once you build it, there will be enough pedestrians to meet the warrant. Is the conclusion of the study.
I just have a follow-up question on that. Can you explain how there's demand for White Oaks when the houses west of Alameda are in a different school district?
So the Safe Routes to School report on White Oaks Elementary has done a...
You would never have to cross the street to go to White Oaks Elementary if you live west of Alameda.
It's in their watershed.
It's a Clifford School District. It's a Redwood City School District.
South of Alameda, correct. But people walk in all sorts of different...
West of Alameda. So you would never cross Alameda to go to school there because none of those students are in the White Oaks School District or in the San Carlos School District. They're in a different school district.
Okay, so that information has come from the walk study of White Oaks Elementary.
And I understand you would cross along Alameda, but that whole district is in a different school district. The whole area is in a different school district. So I don't, that's confusing to me then, why that would be in a walk study for White Oaks.
I don't know, we can recheck the report, but I have a printout of it now.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just remind the council it's 10:25.
Greg, can I get a motion to extend the meeting?
I move to extend the meeting to 11 p.m.
Okay, a second?
Second. Oh.
Got a motion and second. Can you call the roll, Crystal?
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Venkatesh?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
And Mayor Rack?
Yes. Okay, we've extended to 11. Okay. Is there other, Councilmember McDowell?
I'm sorry,
Did you have
Mr. Mayor,
follow-up? Go
I
ahead.
wanted,
Please go ahead.
I
And then
wanted to
Councilmember
continue.
McDowell.
All right, so the question, the reason I asked that is there, again, city legal exposure if we've now done the study, we've now recommended this, and then we don't do it? Or do we have any legal exposure if we don't follow through?
Well, I don't know. That's a complicated question, but I don't think there's any more leaving the situation the way it is because we haven't compared the two really. So I can't really answer it other than I don't know what the facts are going to happen, but I don't think there's more risk to keeping it the way it is or less risk.
Okay, all right. And the other question I had, I thought of what we were talking about all this is, we're going to be putting in a rapid flashing signal at Howard and Alameda, correct?
Yes, that will be part of the fire station.
I'm wondering, and when is that planned to go in? Is that like next April when the station opens, or?
Yeah, probably right around that time frame, yes.
Okay. So again, thinking out loud, wondering out loud, I'm wondering whether or not that, installing that, which is, it doesn't exist now, there's really no way to cross Alameda. There's a crosswalk, but there's no signal there, okay? What I'm wondering is whether or not that might help the situation with a rapid flashing beacon that would be warning people, it would be calling attention to that intersection. And it would be encouraging people to use that intersection more because of there's an addition of a light. That's my question. And I realize it's speculative on your part.
Well, that is an area that we have had there crossings there, and that's one of the reasons why we put the pedestrian paddle kind of in the center of the street, just because there has been more activity, crossing activity there. So, and we were anticipating that. As a result, this would be a good opportunity to put the flashing beacons again to provide a little bit more visibility to the pedestrians who wish to cross there.
Okay. No, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Councilmember McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Ron. Those are good points. So I'm just going to make some comments since I didn't chime in earlier. I love pedestrian enhancements and I love rapid flashing beacons. I think our safe routes to school improvements have been really important. I love what we've done on Britton. I have no issue with the crosswalk at Industrial, and I think given the number of accidents and pedestrian incidents that was in the staff report, I think that enhancement is actually long overdue, so I'm happy to support that. I do have concerns with the Hilltop project. I mentioned this before, but I'm concerned with the data that we've been presented with. It was collected over one day on a weekday. I feel like there's more pedestrians on a weekend. The counts were done at limited hours from 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m., and I think more people crossed during, the whole day. But what most concerns me is the red curb. And I know that there are circumstances like building out sidewalks or building out bike lanes. That warrants red curbing. But having difficulty seeing left when you're in your car, and making red curbing down the street, that kind of seems to me like we'd be opening up a Pandora's box. There are many streets that intersect with Alameda where it's difficult to see left due to parked cars, and you have to be very patient, and you have to kind of inch out and double check. There's streets right around City Hall where this happens. I think this is a problem throughout the city. So if we are red curbing for this reason, that seems like a pretty big policy decision to me. It would potentially mean a lot of red curbing throughout our city. I'm not comfortable with setting that precedent, and I think that would cause a lot of consternation among our residents. So I would support pulling the Hilltop project and proceeding with the industrial road. I appreciate that the Alameda Corridor study can be in the hopper. In budget time, maybe council will consider prioritizing that. I would like to look at having, thank you very much, Hania, for your explanation about the speed limits. I maintain that that's still super confusing for drivers. I also think that along that corridor, we should be looking at sidewalk gaps. Right now, there's no sidewalk on the eastern side of Alameda between Wildwood and Britton, which when people run out of sidewalk, then they're forced to cross dangerously where there is no crosswalk. There should be sidewalk leading up to our new crossing signal at Howard. So I appreciate moving forward with that, and that's where I stand on those two projects. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember McDowell. So I think, because I think Councilmember Venkatesh, myself, and Councilmember McDowell were comfortable sort of splitting this out. I don't know how Councilmember Collins feels or Vice Mayor Dugan. Okay, so did you want to chime in?
I just, I'm strongly in favor of industrial road, and I'm interested in what my colleagues feel further about Alameda, but the idea of Alameda is inherently hazardous. I drive it regularly. I see 50 miles an hour on Alameda. It can get crazy sometimes. So I'm generally in support of any safety measures on Alameda, but it seems like maybe a comprehensive study is really what we need there. So, I hate saying no to something that our engineers say will improve safety, but I do hear the concerns of the neighborhood, and it does feel like a comprehensive study is probably what we most need.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. Councilmember Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also support the industrial crossing. I think that's kind of a no-brainer, and I hope staff understands that I can't remember an incident where I didn't go along with what staff recommended when it comes to traffic safety improvements. I mean, John said similar to how I feel. I really don't like going against a well-studied, well-thought-out, researched staff report and the work you put in, which I really appreciate. But this is one instance where I'm not comfortable proceeding with it until we figure out what some of the other options are. And John's right. I mean, Alameda is just it's not a good corridor. It's so truncated and narrow in some spots, wide in others. People go all different kinds of speeds. It's a real issue for us. And 99% of the drivers probably, when they're driving down Alameda, they think they're in San Carlos. They don't realize that one half of the road's in Redwood City for part of it. I found that when I was running for council. I thought, well, why can't I go to those houses? Well, those are in San Carlos. No, they're not. They're in Redwood City. So, it made my precinct walking easier. But my point is, a lot of people don't know that they're splitting two cities when they're on Alameda. So anyway, that's my struggle.
You want to annex that part? Is that what you're proposing?
I want to do that, yeah.
Okay, I think we have a majority of the council on this, and I would, Hannah, want to look at that just that Safe Routes to School study, because as I think more, it could be something from St. Charles maybe school, but I know that, so I just would love to get that data at some point to understand.
Have to reach back out to, this was done, I think, in 2022. So we would have to reach out to the consultant who did it and see why they have that as their watershed. If, if the other side is completely a different school, this would not make sense. But that's what the report says.
I used to live in the other school district, then we moved into St. Carlos School District.
Understand, but if this, they would have to revise that report because it's published.
Yes, so that's helpful. I will, but I'd love to see that data when we get a chance. So thank you.
I can send it to you tomorrow morning.
Thank you. All right, so I think we have the sort of direction from the council. So I guess if someone could make a motion to split this and approve one, sort of recommend moving one forward, and then we can go from there. Vice Mayor Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-135, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos approving the 2023 Mid-Block Crossing Project C1807 plans and specifications, and authorizing a call for bids for the industrial road aspect of the project and not for the Alameda aspect of this project.
Okay. And a second?
I'll second.
Okay. And Greg, is that clear enough?
Yes.
Okay. Crystal, can you call the roll?
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Venkatesh?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Dugan?
Yes.
And Mayor Rack?
Yes. Okay, the motion passes 5-0. All right, let's move on. We have one last item before general public comment, and that is item 11B, which is consideration of adopting a resolution designating city-owned parcels APN 051-061-200 consisting of approximately 6.93 acres as lands added to the area of Eaton Park, and designated city-owned parcel APN 050-561-030 consisting of approximately 37.9 acres as lands added to the area of Big Canyon Park.
Adam.
Thank you,
Amy
Mayor
Newby.
Rack. I don't have to read that now. Hi, everyone. Here for the
Hold on
closer
for
tonight.
1 second.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Out of abundance of cautions, I'm going to recuse myself from this one.
Okay. And you can go home if you want.
You're dismissed.
All right, thank you, Pernita. All right, we'll wait till till Councilmember Venkatesh leaves, and then there you go. It's always good when that's the last item.
Yeah.
I think that was planned that way.
We could put her lot into the park, too.
Yeah, we can we do that?
You can.
Can we do that while she's gone?
Yeah, oh, nice.
There's our community pool.
Done and done.
All right. Amy Newby.
Thank you. So I will, as Adam mentioned, tonight for your consideration is designating city-owned parcels to be part of the park boundaries in Eaton Park and Big Canyon Park. So the purpose of this resolution is to incorporate the Eaton parcel lands into the boundaries of Eaton Park, and similarly, the Big Canyon parcel lands into the boundaries of Big Canyon Park, thus increasing reference to acreage of these two parks in planning documents. This item corresponds to the general plan, Parks and Recreation element, policies and actions, which include the action to strive to provide a minimum of 2.5 acres of traditional parkland for every 1,000 residents, the policy to continue to maintain city-owned open space trails and connections to regional trails, and a policy to promote the development of publicly accessed urban trails throughout the city to provide access to the natural environment and facilitate non-motorized transportation options. Additionally, an action identified in the general plan is to extend and improve trails in Big Canyon, Eaton, and Arguello parks, as well as the policy to continue to support community events, volunteers, and nonprofits. This proposed resolution would not affect the existing 4-H club operations in the Eaton parcel. The proposed resolution would add the lands to the two identified city-owned parcels here. Sorry about that. to each of the parks and increasing the area and acres of both parks. Should council adopt this resolution tonight, the zoning of the open space properties will not change. So getting into the specifics of each park, the Eaton parcel, just shy of 7 acres, was conveyed to and accepted by the city by a series of gifts of deeds from 1967 to 1977 and currently zoned as open space. The Eaton parcel has always functionally been a part of the park, and you'll notice on the map on the next slide that the entrance to the park is at the end of Eaton Avenue, where one of our trail entrances lies. And roughly 10 to 12 years ago, when the city completed the Hillside Trails Plan, trails were added and integrated with existing trails established in the 70s. And under this proposed resolution, the park size would increase by about 12% to 64.53 acres. And you can see here on the map, highlighted in yellow is the parcel we are referring to, and you can see it in relation to the existing park boundaries. And this is Eaton Park. Moving on to Big Canyon Park, back in 1979, the Big Canyon parcel was conveyed to the city by a developer. The parcel being discussed tonight is zoned as open space and consists of approximately 37.9 acres. Similar to the Eaton parcel in the last 10 to 12 years when the city developed the Hillside Trails Plan and added trails to this parcel and integrated the trails with the trails established in the 70s in Big Canyon Park. Under this proposed resolution, Big Canyon Park boundaries would increase by the 37.9 acres for a total of 53.9 acres. And then here you can see it referenced in the map in yellow. You can see it's a significant part of what the general community and residents feel is Big Canyon Park. I will note that no changes are proposed to the use of the parcels. Therefore, the adoption of this resolution is exempt from CEQA under 2 sections. First, section 15301, the existing facilities exemption, and section 15308, actions by regulatory agencies for the protection of the environment. The common sense exemption also applies to the proposed action by council tonight. And lastly, this resolution is consistent with sections 15313 and 15316, as it will underscore that the land will remain in its natural condition and it will become part of the existing open space park facility. And with that, you have 3 of us here to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Amy. Are there any questions? Vice Mayor Dugan.
Thank you. Thank you, Amy. Appreciate the overview. Is there any reason at all we wouldn't want to add 12% to the size of our Eaton Park?
Not that I can think of.
We thought about it after the direction we received, and we did some thorough research about the history of the gift to the city. We found there's no restriction related to the gift. We believe that it just was never done in the past to be added to the park, even though it's contiguous with the park and it's the main entrance to the southern entrance to the park crosses this parcel.
Great. Well, I'll just say congratulations, Mr. Mayor. You're racking up successes on expanding our parkland and access to it, so thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Dugan. I appreciate your support on the committee, subcommittee as well. And I don't see any question. I just want to thank Amy and Andrea and Greg for all their work on this, and Jeff has been in some of those meetings as well. So thank you for all the work on this. I appreciate it, and looking forward to bringing more into the parks. There you go. All right, Crystal, is there any public comment on this item? I don't have anyone in the room.
There are no hands for this item.
Okay. Is there anyone left online? Are we good to?
On a motion?
Okay. All right. We'll take a motion then.
All right. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-136, a resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos designating city-owned parcel APN 051-061-200 consisting of approximately 6.93 acres as lands added to the area of Eaton Park and designating city-owned parcel APN 050-561-030 consisting of approximately 37.9 acres as lands added to the area of Big Canyon Park.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Crystal, can you call the roll?
Vice Mayor Dugan?
Yes.
Councilmember Collins?
Yes.
Councilmember McDowell?
Yes.
Councilmember Venkatesh has recused herself, and Mayor Rack.
Yes. Okay, we have one, I think we just have no agenda setting. There's nothing on agenda setting, and then public comment. This is persons wishing to address the city council on matters not on the posted agenda may do so. Each speaker is limited to 2 minutes.
I do not have any slips for in-person, and there are no hands on Zoom.
Okay, with that, I will adjourn the meeting.